Hey guys, this is CRP speaking to you live. It's 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and so we're starting up. There's been a bit of confusion because the fucking Demio platform piece of shit garbage says that it's starting in 6 hours, and no, it's starting now. But see, because I put in my time, my local time, it just fucks it up. Okay, just trust me on this, because apparently it somehow detects where I am, even though in my account I explicitly say that I'm on Eastern Standard Time and I want to start shit at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. But it's like, no, it's going to be in 6 more hours. It's like, what the fuck? Okay, it's just garbage, 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 garbage. So yeah, we're starting now, and we've got 20 attendees. So yeah, this was the topic that you all wanted to talk about. Okay, I got like something like 30 thumbs up for this particular topic. A counterpart to my post, which books to read and why and how to read them. I'll talk about the movies that you ought to see and why you should see them. Now, of course, there are thousands of movies, and in this list, of course, it's not the best movies or the most important. No, it's the movies that you ought to see, and you'll be able to understand the entire genre. Some of the pictures that I'm going to mention are a bit obscure, and some of them are like, what the fuck, right? And a lot of pictures are not going to be on this list. A lot of really great pictures that are my favorites, are not going to be on this list for reasons that I'm going to get into. But what I want to make is a list of the movies that you ought to see. And from this starting point, you can sort of like explore filmmaking and the great movies. I've said before in another stream that I think that film is over as an art form. It's had its day and all the rest of it. And I'll go over that argument, and I'll explain the different stages of no, not the Matrix trilogy. The Matrix trilogy was insignificant, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I'll go over the reasons of the movies that I'm picking, and how you should look at film in order to grasp it and understand it as an art form. Okay, and especially now that the best years of filmmaking are behind us. And so we should like look in the rearview mirror and sort of like get a sense for the lay of the land, as it were, to mix my metaphors. So anyway, no, Citizen Kane's not on it because it's not a key picture. Okay, and a lot of these movies that I'm going to be mentioning, you're going to be like, how could you put this movie? But there are reasons for it. So I'll get to that in just a second. Well, obviously you guys can hear me properly. Why don't you give me a +1 if you can see me properly. You should be seeing my ugly mug on screen. And yeah, okay, great. Next week what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an Ask Me Anything, because it'll just to break it up. And I'll do a video about the second most popular topic, which was what you call it, people you should admire and why. I think that that's actually an important topic. And the TLDR is going to be basically that you should admire those men who exhibit qualities that you would like to have for yourself. And that's what you should be focused on. You don't want to be somebody else. You want to acquire the qualities that they have. Okay, because a lot of times somebody else might have certain qualities that you admire, but they themselves have a bunch of other shit that you don't want any part of. You see what I'm saying? And so you got to sort of like pick and choose, and you should admire those people who have those qualities that you admire, but ignore or just walk away from the negative qualities. And you also have to see sometimes those negative qualities are the fuel for the positive qualities. And so you have to make a cool analysis and figure that out. But that's for a different video. Let's get into movies. And let me share my screen with you right now. And the screen I'm going to be sharing, as usual, is movies you must watch and why. As usual, it's a purple background. You ought to be seeing it. Just to assuage my worries, give me a +1 if you guys can see properly the typical PowerPoint +1, the PowerPoint purple background. Yeah, okay, great. So we're all on board. Okay, let's get cracking. The movies you must watch and why. Okay, so the movies you must watch and why. Well, see, this is the first of 2 slides. And you know something? Hang on. I'm going to stop sharing this for just a moment, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something really that I should have done before, and it's going to take me just 2 seconds. So just hang on just a second. I'm going to export it as a PDF and give it to you. Why movies? Oh, sorry. The movies you should watch. And I should have done this before. Sorry, it just slipped my mind. Just as we were getting ready to do this, I kind of like remembered I could do this. I mean, just as I started, rather, I remembered I can do this. So let me share the screen again with you. There we go. And let me go back to the demo, and I'll give you all a handout. And the handout is going to be handout. That's what I want. And there's the PDF. It's loading up. 3, 4, 5. And there it's cycling up. And 50, 70. There we go. 100%. And share now. Okay. You guys should be able to see that. Okay, great. Fantastic. Okay, so let's get cracking. See, the first thing you have to understand is what movies are and what movie watching is about, okay? See, I've said this before and I'll repeat it. See, movies are a unique art form because, see, when you experience a movie in the proper setting, which is in a cinema, what is it? It's a dark room, and you are sitting in very comfortable chairs. And presumably you're in a very comfortable state. You've probably had something to eat, something to drink. You're feeling tip-top. And the only input, sensory input that you are receiving is the audio and visual that's coming from the screen and the speakers around you. In a very real sense, it's a sense deprivation chamber. And you are being bombarded by this art form. It's an enveloping art form. And of course, you're going to have some sensory input, the smell of your popcorn perhaps, or of your soft drink, and the feel of the chair that you're in. But for the most part, you're not going to have any distractions. And what's key is that the movie that you are watching it at the speed that the filmmaker wants you to watch it. Because you can't like sit back in your chair in the cinema and just like hit the remote control and make it go faster, right? Or skip ahead. You can't do that. You can do that at home in your home theater, but you can't do it when you're watching it at a cinema as it's meant to be seen, okay? This is a very powerful art form. You read a book, you read it at your own pace. You can read it in one sitting or read a page a day or a page a week. You go to a museum or an art gallery, you see some painting, you could just glance at it and walk away or stare at it for hours. You see my point? The movie-going experience is an experience, and it captures your consciousness for the set amount of time of the movie. This is remarkable. This is extraordinary, okay? This is really just key, okay? That you're able to lose your sense of consciousness and be completely enveloped by what you're watching, okay? So that, right off the bat, it makes it a unique art form. Okay. The second issue is that, see, genres and movies are dictated by popular appeal. See, a guy writes a book, and the guy can write whatever book he feels like it. There are some books that sell more than others. But see, the cost of making the book, of writing it, is the same for all writers. It's their time and attention as they crank out the novel or book or whatever it is that they're trying to sell, that they're trying to publish. But see, filmmaking is such an expensive medium, because it requires so many people and so much expense insofar as going to location, hiring the actors, hiring the cameras, and buying the film stock or whatever. and then later in post-production, editing the film, or editing the film either in analog film stock or digital film. It's a huge expense. And therefore, the genres that become popular, they become popular because people like them. It's a very democratic art form, okay? And it's the democracy of this art form comes from the fact that it's so expensive. This is very important. Okay, so you have to understand that filmmaking is a dying art form. And the reason it's dying is because it's so expensive, and it's become so expensive, but the filmmakers are not recouping their money as they used to. Because before, there were a whole bunch of different avenues to recoup the expenses. There was theaters, there was airlines that would show the movies, there was television, there was video cassette, and then DVD, pay-per-view, and whatnot. But now with streaming services, well, the streaming services have paradoxically made movies, individual movies, less financially successful. They generate less revenue, each individual movie. And so therefore, there are fewer movies being made. And this is objectively true. And forget about COVID and all that shit, which has, of course, destroyed theaters because they've gone over a year without any customers. And theaters are, of course, what are they? They are large buildings in a city or a suburb, usually very expensive to rent or to build. And so since they're not getting any revenue, these companies are going bankrupt left and right. And so this is a disaster for films. The other issue that I didn't point out here that I ought to point out is that so much of filmmaking has been captured by woke ideology, forcing this woke bullshit down people's throats, and people don't like it. They don't like this shit, and so they don't go and see these movies. And so a lot of these movies, like for instance, Get Out. Everybody says that Get Out is such a great movie. It's not really a great movie. It's just a remake of The Stepford Wives, right? And Get Out, though, is just woke up the wazoo, and nobody went to see the fucking thing. But it got a bunch of awards and shit like that, and all kinds of praise from the woke media. But people did not go to see it. The picture was not a financial success, or it broke even, but it was not a huge financial success. You see my point? See? I mean, there are all these things that are conspiring, not conspiring, but coming together to basically destroy the art form. But the number one reason is the home theater, because you can have a big screen at home, a huge screen at home, and watch movies, any movie you want, from the comfort of your living room. And so people just don't go out. They buy the streaming services. And the streaming services make money for the streamers, but not for the film producers. And so the film producer is producing less. And on top of that, the streamers, they really make their money from long-form TV shows, episodic TV shows that go on and on and on, Breaking Bad and whatnot. Or like The Crown. The Crown is extremely successful. And that's a typical example of a show that is extremely successful on stream that could not be shown on movies because it's endless, right? And that's what streamers want. They want people to have their eyes glued to the streaming services and keep on paying every month. And so of course, films are dying, okay? And they're probably not going to be coming back. The golden age is behind us, okay? And of course, this has been said before, as I'll explain when I get to the different periods in the filmmaking business. But I do believe that this time around, it's pretty much it. And I'll explain why. Now, you have to understand that because of these factors, the peak of filmmaking, of movies, happened not too long ago, as a matter of fact. Because in most art forms, what happens is that, see, there is an initial development phase where people discover the art form, discover how to use it, and they start making examples of the art form, and they get better and better at it. And then eventually they start getting better and better and better, and all of a sudden it gets to a peak, okay? Or from your point of view, it goes slowly, and quality goes up and up and up and up and up and up, and it peaks, and then it crashes, okay? That's usually the model in just about every art form. The best novels in world literature were written near the end of the 19th century. And that's when it crashed. Why did it crash? Because movies happened. Movies killed the novel, okay? And so when movies showed up, That was the funeral dirge of the novel. But the best novels were written right before that happened. Isn't that weird? It's like always the case. Or you could think of it in these terms. See, there are creative people, and they migrate to different art forms. See, back in the past, they were poets and musicians and gestures and whatnot. And then they got into playwriting in the Middle Ages. And then they got into novel writing in the 17th and 18th century and 19th century. And then they got into movie making in the 20th century. And then the next century, who knows where they'll go? Maybe video games or maybe some other art form that we haven't anticipated yet. But see, you understand what happens. The creative people, the really creative people, the real geniuses, they migrate from art form to art form. See? And as the art form becomes more popular, it attracts the smarter and smarter guys, the more talented people, until that art form peaks. And then it peaks, and then a new art form appears. And what happens is that for whatever reason, this new art form is more popular, and so the creative people leave the old art form and they join the new one. And it goes up again like a whole new curve, you see? And that's what we're experiencing now. The most creative people are no longer making movies. And so they are moving on to other things. And that's why filmmaking is just not that good. It hasn't been very good for the last 10, 15 years. I'll get to that in a moment when I get to the movies, okay? So the key issue is what makes a great movie? Well, a lot of people say story. A lot of people say actors. A lot of people say this, that, cinematography, spectacle. It's all bullshit. It's all editing. See, because filmmaking is all about editing. That's the thing about filmmaking. It's about editing, about cutting, about seeing one sequence of moving pictures and then intercut by a different sequence of moving pictures. See, like in Birth of a Nation, one of the seminal movies, and the first one on my list that I'll get to in just a moment. See, in Birth of a Nation, see, it defined a whole bunch of rules insofar as cutting, and you could have things happening, two different things happening at the same time, and you'd cut and see one thing happening, and you'd cut to the other thing that's happening. Sometimes you could even go cut to one, cut to a second, and then to a third, and then go back again, you know? And you could do that in film. And that is a unique ability of the art form. To be able to see simultaneously two or more things happening at the same time and watch as those two or more things intersect into something dramatic. And that creates tension, a buildup. See, this didn't exist in any other art form, okay? I mean, it came close in certain novelists, and some of the best novelists who would show two things happening simultaneously, or in Shakespeare, that happens often. But that sense of creative, of using that to create tension and that intersection of plot lines, that's film all the way, baby. So anyway, editing is the first thing that you should pay attention to. And you'll notice with the great pictures is that there is never a dull moment. You watch Star Wars, what George Lucas renamed A New Hope. It's just so fucking confusing. It's just Star Wars. That was the first fucking movie in 1977. I saw it. I was there. It was called Star Wars, not A New Hope. And when it came out in 1977, it didn't have this bullshit of like Chapter 4, A New Hope. That was later. When it came out, it just had the title scroll. It was just Star Wars. Never forget that. I was there. I saw it at a drive-in theater in Los Angeles in 1977. So I know what I'm talking about. So fuck you very much. Anyway, you watch Star Wars, and there are bits of it that are really fucking boring. Like there's this sequence where the two robots are on the desert planet, and they're just wandering around. It's really fucking boring. And there's no sense of tension because, see, a lot of times you can have like a sequence where it shows something mundane, but of course you, the audience, know that something's going to happen, and so it builds up this tension, right? But no, in that sequence, they're just wandering around. Oh, like there's a skeleton of some animal that died, some alien animal in this desert, but it's boring. There's a lot of that going on in Star Wars. That's an example of why Star Wars is not a great picture. It's very spectacular, and it's very important for other reasons, but it's not a great picture. Empire Strikes Back is a great picture, but the point I want to emphasize, a great picture Every single scene, every single shot is telling you something, is giving you more information. Every single shot is not boring. Even something mundane, when you're like looking at some, empty chair or something, empty chair just reminded me of the sequence in what you call it, the movie The Social Network, the picture by David Fincher from 2003, I believe. That there's this conference with lawyers and they're arguing, right? And at one point, one lawyer talks to another character, the Jeff Zuckerberg character, and they're talking about another character, the Eduardo character, who's a friend of, or former friend of Mark Zuckerberg, who's suing him now. And there's a back and forth between one of the lawyers and Zuckerberg, and then they refer to Eduardo and the camera points to an empty chair. It's a shot of an empty chair, but you just see that shot and you're like, oh yeah, the guy is not in the room, and more importantly, he is no longer Zuckerberg's friend. And this is powerful shit, see? And that is a shot that seems incredibly mundane. If you just looked at it, it's just 2 seconds of an empty chair, or 3 seconds of an empty chair. That's boring, but in the context, in how it's edited, it's fascinating. Social Network, for instance, is a great picture. It's not one of the pictures that I have on my list, but it is a great picture, objectively. It's an incredibly good picture, okay? And so, I mean, great picture, but I'm getting ahead of myself. You have to understand that a great picture always has great editing, great pacing. Pacing is that rhythm of the story, of you acquiring new information about the story in a way that is not jarring and is not boring and is not drawn out and is not too soon or too rushed. It's that Goldilocks, just right feeling that you're getting new information about the story and it's coming into you, into your head at just the right moment so that you understand the overall picture, or more correctly, you get the impression that the filmmaker wants to give you about the story you're watching. You see? Okay. And the second issue is, of course, story. Story, see, lately, man, most of the stories are garbage, see, because people don't understand, especially now in the filmmaking business, they don't understand what the point of story is. Story is not an end in itself. It's not shit that happens. Story is supposed to reveal stuff about people, about the characters that you're watching. See? That's the whole point of a story. The story reveals the characters by what they do and what they fail to do. And so, as they do things, you understand them better. You understand them better. And of course, you, as a human being, watch them and you realize that what they are doing is something that you might have done. And you identify with them. You don't identify with them because they have the same skin color or sex that you do. You identify with them because they behave in ways that are similar to the way you behave. They feel things similar to what you feel. And by identifying with their actions and their emotions, well, first of all, that's true identification, see? Just seeing some guy, I mean, like, I'm a middle-aged Hispanic guy. Do I want to see middle-aged Hispanic guys on screen? Not really. Not unless they're doing something really interesting or revealing something about themselves. But prima facie, if somebody says, do you want to see a movie about a middle-aged Latino guy? I'm like, fuck no, I am one. Why the fuck would I want to see one? I mean, I'm there. I know that story, okay? But if you tell me that, oh, it's about this guy who decides that he's going to make a balloon and go around the world in 90 days or 80 days, right? Then I'd be like, okay, this sounds more interesting. Then it's something I might want to see. You see my point? And do I care if the guy who's going to go around the world in 80 days in a balloon is like me or totally different from me? I could care less, okay? Because I'm not interested in him being like me. I'm interested in what he's going to do, what limitations are on him, and how is he going to overcome those limitations? Those limitations or obstacles. Either the obstacles of his environment or the limitations of his own character. See? And so the story, if it does that, then it's interesting. See? And so great stories do that. Great stories reveal. The Godfather is a great movie because it reveals a man who is fundamentally decent who winds up becoming Satan at the end of the movie, at the end of the first movie. because both The Godfather and Godfather 2 are on my list, but for very different reasons. Because the first one, it's a man who is a good and decent man, loyal, loving, who wants to help and save his family and his father, and he winds up becoming Satan. And the second movie is about a man who's powerful and rich and has the world by the balls, but he knows that he's not the man his father was. And he's trying to understand why he is not the man his father was. It's a Shakespearean tragedy. Both movies are fantastic, but for radically different reasons, even though they have the same characters, you know? So anyway, but you see my point. Story as it reveals character, as it reveals human truths. That's why a story matters. That somebody did this and that and won the prize and got this and that. Who gives a shit? That's boring, okay? It's like Transformer movies, the most boring fucking movies ever made. Because what is it? It's a bunch of robots fighting each other. Who gives a shit? I mean, come on, right? I mean, a fucking robot fighting another robot. Who cares? You know, it's like flipping a coin. Whoever wins, wins, okay? And there's nothing overcome by it. Compare the Transformers movies, where you have robots fighting robots, to Luke Skywalker's journey in The Empire Strikes Back. In The Empire Strikes Back, he is a brash young man who needs to confront his nemesis, Darth Vader. And he is warned throughout the movie that if he goes down that route, he's really only going to see something he doesn't want to see. He's going to see himself. The vision in the cave, the dream in the cave, that showed that. That was the whole point of it. And he gets to his confrontation with Darth Vader, he loses, and he discovers that Darth Vader, his nemesis, his arch enemy, is his father, the man he has idolized. That's powerful shit. That's a great fucking story, you know? And so, and that, of course, is one of the movies on my list, but you see how important story is. It's not merely just battles and shit of things happening. They have to reveal truths about human beings, okay? Even if they're made up human beings, that doesn't really matter. I mean, let me rephrase that. All characters in movies and books and literature and plays and whatnot, they're all made up, or the majority of them. And if they're based on historical characters, the authors and the filmmakers and whomever altered them all kinds of ways and make them unrecognizable to the real thing, because they're just jumping off from a historical event to show human truths. See? And so anyway, and by the way, that's why I think that Citizen Kane is not that big of a deal, because the human truths it reveals are just trivial. It's just stupid, you know? I've never quite understood this obsession with Citizen Kane, but we'll get there soon enough. Okay, so the third element of films, of great films, is spectacle, okay? A great film has spectacle in the sense of it shows you a wider world. Now, often the great films don't show you like these great vistas of anything, okay? A great film that's not on my list, but it is a great film, is The Paper Chase. The Paper Chase is about a law student at Harvard in his first year and his relationship with his contracts professor, Professor Kingsley. And the young man there, you know, he has these intellectual battles with this professor. And they take place in a classroom, a very pretty classroom, right? But it's very small and intimate, and yet it's spectacular. It feels like a Roman Colosseum, okay? It's one of these amphitheater type classrooms, right? And you watch it and you're like thrilled by it because it just seems so exciting and it's intellectual, but you feel that it's a blood sport, only with words and pen and paper rather than, you know, swords and grappling hooks. You see what I'm saying? It's a powerful shit, but that's an example of spectacle in a very, very small setting, but still spectacular. And a lot of the movies that are made, like a lot of the CGI monstrosities, you know, the Marvel movies and whatnot, they show huge vistas, but you can't really enjoy them. You can't linger in them. You can't allow your imagination to soak them in. They're just spectacular and very fast. And so you don't get anything out of them. Whereas, for instance, in Barry Lyndon is one of the most spectacular pictures ever made. It's on my list. And in Barry Lyndon, you see all of these shots that are composed so perfectly by Kubrick. I mean, I have a lot of criticisms of Stanley Kubrick, but he knew how to compose a shot. And in in those different shots in Barry Lyndon, you see the spectacle, the beauty, the hugeness, and you understand how that setting influences the character. Okay? And so anyway, those are the three things that great movies bring. Great editing, pacing, great story that reveals human truths, and spectacle that just overwhelms you. You have to think of movies as a lean forward, lean back kind of situation. See, you lean forward when you're really interested. You're like totally locked into the story that's taking place in front of your eyes. You lean in because you want to hear every fucking word. You want to be there, as two characters are talking. And sometimes the most powerful moments are when two people are not talking, when they've just said something and they're just looking at one another and trying to suss out what's going to happen next. And you're like, holy shit, this is so dramatic. And you're leaning forward, right? And then there's the moment when you lean back because the spectacle on the screen is just overwhelming you. You're seeing like battles, like Saving Private Ryan, for instance. The opening 30 minutes of Saving Private Ryan are the most spectacular in film history. And it's overwhelming how this shit just assaults your brain and your eyes, right? But it's just, you're leaning back, but you understand everything with perfect clarity. And yet at the same time, it just overwhelms you, right? Unlike so many of the Marvel movies or the Transformer movies that have huge images, but it's all happening so fast and so confusingly that you don't understand what the fuck is going on. It's just like some mess is going on. It's like background noise, see? And that's an example of bad spectacle and good spectacle, okay? But anyway, those are the three elements for great movies, okay? Because I'm not including great acting, because good acting, that's like a given, see? Nobody notices good acting. People notice crappy acting, but they don't notice good acting. A lot of times people confuse memorable characters with great acting, okay? And the memorable characters are a part of spectacle, see? A memorable character, like for instance, Hannibal Lecter, that's a memorable character, right? Did Anthony Hopkins do anything really great? Not really, in the sense of, it was based on the character and the dialogue. He created a great character and performed it very well. But see, it was the spectacle of the character that's memorable. Because at a certain level of acting, it's all pretty much the same. And there are lots of great actors who have done very, very good work, but it's not memorable because the character wasn't memorable. Anthony Hopkins, again, before Silence of the Lambs, he did a lot of movies that were very good. His acting was impeccable. Like, for instance, Elephant Man. That was a really, really good acting job that he did in that picture. But it's completely, in a way, forgettable because the character is not memorable. He's the doctor who discovered the Elephant Man. That John Merrick, played by, what's his name, who's in Heaven's Gate, his name is slipping my mind, but you know who I'm talking about, who played the John Merrick character in Elephant Man, David Lynch's version of it. Well, he's really memorable because of the prosthetics and also because of his personality, the personality that shines through his deformity. And that's really powerful. But Anthony Hopkins, who's playing essentially the straight man role, he's doing it very, very well. You watch his performance, it's an extremely good performance, but it's not memorable, see? And most actors, they deliver very good performances. Most professional actors are very good at their craft. But it depends on how memorable the character is, not on the acting. You see my point? Okay, so great movies can be categorized by genre, by year and period, and by filmmaker, okay? Like, there are all kinds of genres. There's Westerns, there's, I forgot to put Westerns in my thing. But anyway, there's Westerns, there's sword and sandals epics, there's science fiction, there's comedies, right? There's romance, there are romantic comedies. All of these pictures. Genres emerge because it's what people want to see, okay? It's as simple as that. And what happens is that a lot of times, one particular movie of one particular genre becomes popular, and all the other film producers decide, if that's popular, let's make another one just like it of that same genre. And people go to it. And usually the first iteration is the best, usually, but not always. And then the second, third, and fourth are very, very good, and sometimes even superior. But then it starts to decay. By the fifth, sixth, it starts they start getting lazy, or more accurately, the less talented people start making pictures in that particular genre. And the genre slowly decays. And it gets to a point where all of a sudden, very capable people get a lot of money to make a very big genre picture, and they fuck it up. They fuck it up royally, okay? And that is usually the end of that spectacle for a while. Like, for an example, in 1951, the picture Quo Vadis appeared. It was the first Sands and Swords epic. It was set in Roman times, and it was like a big deal, big hit. And then all kinds of movies like it appeared: Spartacus, Ben-Hur, etc. And eventually, the genre blew up with 1962's Cleopatra, the most expensive swords and sandals epic ever made. And it was with Elizabeth Taylor rather, and Richard Burton. And it was, it had everything going for it in terms of talent, but it was just a fucking disaster. Okay. And after that, they didn't make another swords and sandals epic until 1999 with Gladiator. Okay. 37 years. Yeah. And that happens all the time. With the Western, for instance, same thing. See, there are a lot of Westerns in the 30s and the 40s and into the 50s. And all of a sudden, with CinemaScope, it just got a little bit too much. And there were a few flops that were a little bit too big. And the genre disappeared during the 60s and 70s and 80s. The only one who was doing Westerns was Clint Eastwood with the outlaw Josie Wales. And then it finally came back with Unforgiven. Unforgiven in 1991 revived the genre. The genre was dead as Dillinger. And it was Unforgiven that brought it back. And then the next year, or the year before, I forget, it was Dances with Wolves. That was kind of like a Western. I mean, Unforgiven was a real Western. Dances with Wolves was like, white savior bullshit. But that's another story. See, the point, the genre is sort of like ebb and flow. There's even the genre of the Oscar bait picture, of the prestige picture. You look at the Oscars, of the winners for Best Picture of the Oscars, and you're going to find so many forgettable pictures that nobody remembers today. In 1999, in early 1999, for the Oscars for the 1998 calendar year, Saving Private Ryan was up against Shakespeare in Love. And Saving Private Ryan was the superior picture. It really is a groundbreaking picture in many ways. But it was Shakespeare in Love that won, okay? A few years ago, it was The King's Speech, the most Oscar-baity picture ever made, okay? That picture was made to get Oscars for the makers, okay? See, these prestige pictures that are about, quote-unquote, important topics that are basically harmless, because it's not about anything that's contingently important to people, like, I don't know, abortion, gun control, taxes, or some shit like that. No. Oscar bait pictures are about some important person or personage of the past, and the events that happened that are really unimportant to us, but they're interesting, as like sort of interesting, and they're very well made and very polite pictures. Beckett, for instance, is an example of this. Okay, of a picture that was all kinds of Oscar bait, but who gives a shit about the picture? You see, King's Speech, another example. It was a fine picture. I mean, I don't have anything against any of the people who made it, but it was just bullshit. It was just Oscar bait. It's a genre picture. See? So you have to understand that genres is not just Westerns or sci-fi movies. It's also prestige movies. It's also blockbuster movies. See? There is a genre called the blockbuster. And what is the blockbuster? It's a big movie that will guarantee a lot of fucking people will go and see it, and therefore shell out a lot of money for the people producing it. Okay? And this is, of course, extremely important if you're making a very expensive picture. See? And we'll get to that in just a second. There are different periods. Looking at pictures by year is self-defeating, I think, because there are some years where you have all kinds of good pictures. Like, for instance, in my own list, I have 5 pictures, I think, from 1994, and several decades that I have like 1 picture. Okay, I mean, there are some years that are just a bumper crop, and other years, decades, half decades that are sort of fallow. that nothing much happens. It's much more important to look at movies from the point of view of periods, okay? And finally, there are filmmakers. Now, filmmakers, what I've noticed is that, see, filmmakers are noticed by people who study movies because of their repetitive styles. Let me give you two examples. There's Stanley Kubrick and Sidney Lumet. Now, Sidney Lumet started with 12 Angry Men. He did a whole bunch of movies that were very good. He did Dog Day Afternoon. He did Serpico. He did The Wiz. He did Murder on the Orient Express. That's a fantastic picture. Okay, I mean that's a really, really good picture. You know, star-studded, all kinds of goodness in that picture. He did a whole bunch of really good pictures, but the thing is, he didn't repeat himself stylistically. See, he had the approach of like just trying to get the best shot that would convey what he wanted to convey in each scene, and he didn't try to repeat his shots. Whereas Stanley Kubrick, he always repeated his shots. In a very real sense, stylistically, Stanley Kubrick ended his career with his third picture, Paths of Glory. Paths of Glory was the first of his movies. It was his third movie, and the first of it, where he came across certain stylistic tricks. Well, actually, he kind of like came across these with the previous one, with The Killing. But in Paths of Glory, he really perfected it. Like, for instance, the tracking shot going backwards, right, with the character walking towards him. The lateral shot, right? The sliding dolly shot and curve, okay? There are a whole bunch of shots that he perfected in that picture. And that picture came out in 1958. And he repeated all of these fucking shots from 1958 until his last picture in 1999. And so people see these repetitive shots and say, oh, wow, he's got an incredible style. No, he's just repeating his shots, okay? And sure, over the years, he would add a few shots here and there. In Barry Lyndon, he added the zoom in and zoom out, especially the zoom out, which was very good. But, you know, he didn't really expand his filmmaking palette. Another example of this stylistic sclerosis, if you will, is Peter Greenaway. Peter Greenaway is a filmmaker that you instantly recognize his shots because they're always the same. They're all these lateral shots. But great filmmakers like Sidney Lumet, like Woody Allen, like Francis Ford Coppola, they never repeat their shots. They're always doing something cool, something interesting. They're always creating shots and looks and scenes that work for that particular shot, for that particular scene in that particular movie. They don't repeat their shots. And so a lot of guys who don't know much about movies, figure that somebody like Greenaway, like Kubrick, has a strong style. No, that's bullshit. Frankly, it denotes a lack of imagination. That's what's going on. And it's very funny because a lot of filmmaking students, and I was one of them, by the way, they think that a guy who's got like these repetitive shots is just such an artist. And he's not. He's not at all. He's just unimaginative. Okay? That's simple as that. See? In my own case, for instance, and I'm going to use my own fucking YouTube videos, right? You guys know that over the last couple of years, I'm basically repeating my shots, you know? Initially, when I was doing my videos, I was spending all kinds of time coming up with new shots, inventive shots, right? I decided for various reasons that I wasn't going to pursue that because ultimately I'm just shooting myself in a setting. And it was just like pointless work. And so I decided, no, it's not really worth it, okay? I like to change the look of my videos because a lot of times the lighting creates problems because I have fixed fixed aperture and fixed film speed. I don't put it on the automatic mode where it just adjusts to the light. And because of the lighting problems, which are deliberately created by me, I have to later tweak the color correction to even out the whole thing. And I enjoy that. I enjoy that process very much. It's a lot of fun for me. And so that's why I do it that way. But the point I want to make, see, a lot of times, you know, you follow a filmmaker. And a filmmaker is going to be very, very good, very capable, okay? But don't confuse repetitiveness with talent. A lot of people do that, and it's not the case. Peter Greenaway is a very talented guy. Stanley Kubrick was a very talented guy. But I actually think that their repetitiveness in their shots hurt them. They could have been better filmmakers had it not been for the fact that they kept on using the same shots in their movies. That was a mistake on their part. Anyway, let's move on to the issue of periods. The periods are the most important because the financial considerations dictate the movies that get made, because filmmaking is such an expensive medium. Always remember that, okay? And so there are periods of time when the movies are not very good, or they're very like this or like that or whatever. And it's usually because of the money issue, the money situation. Understand that, okay? Now, the first era was the silent era. That was from 1915 to 1927. 1927 was The Jazz Singer. That was the first talkie film, okay? It's a really boring film, okay? I mean, it's the first talkie film, and you'd think that I would have put it on my list. Nuh-uh, it's boring as fuck. It's not worth watching, okay? I mean, yeah, sure, just, sort of like, look at the highlight reel kind of thing. But no, it's not. And on top of that, right now, because it uses blackface, man, that shit is practically verboten, I mean, people can't even talk about that. And that's the funny thing. In film, many of the most important pictures are, they're racist as fuck. They're racist or sexist or misogynistic or classist or whatever the fuck you want to call it, okay? Hang on, let me just check to see that you guys can hear me. Is it okay? Are you guys hearing me properly? Hit +1 if you can. Yeah? Everything good? Okay. Yeah, because I was just like on this thing, and yeah. So anyway, a lot of the old pictures are racist as fuck, okay? And they are the two of the most important pictures, The Birth of a Nation and The Jazz Singer, are racist. Yeah, it doesn't steal from the fact that they're great movies. Okay, and anybody says otherwise, they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, so that was the first era, the silent era. The golden age of Hollywood was really from 1927 to 1939, and that was a moment, that was a period when talkies came on the scene and everybody just flocked to the movies. Now, you got to keep in mind how movies were shown before. And it's important to understand this. See, in the silent era, they were shown in theaters. And a lot of times what would happen is that they would show a movie and there would be an orchestra pit and the orchestra would play music. Sometimes it was music that came with the movie, with the reels of the movie to be exhibited, or sometimes the music pit would just make up some music and just make up whatever they felt like, right? But what happened is that starting in 1927 with the talkies, with the ability to show not only image but also sound, okay, because it was a technological breakthrough of being able to put on the film stock, which goes up and down like this, which is a long strip of film. Right on the side, they were able to put a magnetic strip with the sound of whatever scene was going on. And so the movie would go through the projector, and it would go through the projector, and it would be projected onto the screen, right? And then lower down in the mechanism, there'd be a magnetic reader to read the sound, okay? And so because of that, you would be able to see the image and hear the sound. Of course, there was a distance between the two, and that was synced up so that when the music played, it would play at the same time, the music or dialogue that played would play at the same time as the image being projected. So it was in sync, okay? And it was always in sync. Now, unless there was some mistake or problem with the projector, but the point. In 1927, that started happening, and so all of a sudden you started to get dedicated cinemas, and it became the golden age of Hollywood, okay? Because it was the most exciting time in filmmaking. And it's a little bit of nostalgia. In a real sense, you can say that the golden age of Hollywood was really from 1927 until 1948. Because you got to keep in mind, back in the day, back in the 20s, the movie studios, Paramount, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, etc., not only did they own the studio where they created these movies, they also owned the theaters where they showed them. And so you'd go to a small town in America, and there'd be Paramount Theater, and across the street would be 20th Century Fox Theater. Okay? It was vertical integration. And so what happened was that these companies, they vertically integrated at all levels. Everything from hiring actors and putting them on contracts to hiring the directors and writers and putting them on contracts to the people who would shoot the film, the editors and whatnot. It became like a machine. A lot of times, a film director would shoot a movie and immediately start shooting the next movie. And it was like a very corporate environment, and they were just shooting constantly. Remember, in this time, starting in 1927, when this really took off, this vertical integration, there was no TV. The only audiovisual entertainment that existed was black and white film at your local theaters, plural. There'd be the Paramount Theater, the Warner Brothers Theater, and so on, as I explained before. And so people would go to these theaters, and in these theaters, it's not that they had the main feature. Think of the term main feature. What they would show is they would show everything during the day. They'd have cartoons. They'd have newsreels. They'd have these episodic stories, basically soap operas. They would have all kinds of movies, mini movies, short movies, before the main feature that would play at 8 p.m. See? And people would pay 10 cents and go to a theater, and they'd walk in whenever, and they'd just sit there and watch whatever was being played. It could be a newsreel. And then after the newsreel, they'd play some Mickey Mouse cartoon. Serious, yeah. Why do you think that those Mickey Mouse cartoons from the 1920s and whatnot that became the basis for Cuphead videos, video game, right? Why do you think that they invented those? For the matinees, for showing them in the theaters during the daytime when the kids would go. See? That's how it worked. Okay? So in 1927, this really took off. In 1933, I believe, the Hayes office was installed because a lot of movies were really fucking racy. I mean, basically softcore porn. And they cleaned it all up because a lot of people were getting outraged, and justifiably so, because you could have little kids would show up with a nickel and wind up seeing basically a titty fest, right? And people were upset about that, and so they put a stop to it. And the Hayes guidelines were put into effect in 1933, I believe. And but anyway, the point is that the golden age happened from 27 to 39, or arguably 48. It doesn't really matter. The war years from 39 to 48 continued more or less what had happened during the golden age of talkies. Now, I'm putting 1939 as that dividing line because that's when the Second World War started, and also it was the year of the great movies of the golden age of talkies. Two of them, The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. Those were the great movies. They were the pinnacle of this period. Pinnacle in spectacle, in story, in craftsmanship. They were fantastic. You watch them today, and they are better than most movies made now. Okay, I mean, on a technical level, yeah. I mean, it didn't have special effects and CGI and shit like that. Or let me rephrase that: it did have special effects, but they were practical special effects, right? There was no CGI, computer-generated images. A lot of these, you look at Gone with the Wind, and it's technically impeccable. And you look at it and see, unless you knew, you wouldn't realize that a lot of the sets were painted. They were matte paintings, see? And there's this great shot of Scarlett O'Hara with Tara, her ancestral home behind her. And she's running towards the camera in this beautiful dress, right? And it's before the Civil War has started. And see, all of that set, that was painted. But you don't realize it because it's so well done, okay? I mean, it's incredible craftsmanship. But anyway, 39 was sort of like the high watermark of the golden age of talkies. Then you had the war years, which continued pretty much what was going on in the golden age. I'm actually not so sure I should have divided the two. But the point is that in 1948, this era ended with two things. Number one was the Paramount case, where the United States government sued Paramount Pictures for antitrust violation, specifically the vertical integration of its theaters. And because of the Supreme Court decision in US versus Paramount, in 1948, all of the studios had to sell off their theaters. They could no longer own their own theaters. They could only, I think it was like they could own 5, and keep in mind that before they'd own thousands. And after this decision, they could only own 5, and they still own them, but they're like little theaters that are usually used for, premieres of some movie or something like that, but they actually have a very small capacity. They're not supposed to, they're not really owned to be moneymakers. They're owned as, for prestige purposes, right? Or marketing purposes. Anyway, the US versus Paramount decision ended that vertical integration. And at the same time, television was coming in. Now, television existed back in 1936. Anybody who's watched the movie Contact will remember very memorably that the first television transmission ever made was the 1936 Berlin Olympics of Adolf Hitler giving a speech, a welcoming speech. That was the first television transmission ever, yeah? But televisions really started happening insofar as a mass market thing, starting in like the very late 40s and into the early 50s. And as TV started to happen, people started buying more and more TVs because they could stay at home and watch the news, and they didn't have to go to the theater with the kids. And this also fit in very nicely with the new Levittown social planning that was going on, where basically you would have segregated housing areas where there were no businesses, basically suburbs. There would be no businesses, only houses. And the only way you could get to these houses was by car. And so going from these suburban houses to an old style theater, like the Paramount Theater in the downtown of your town, right, was a hassle. And so people would stay at home. People would stay at home and watch TV. And that started hurting the film business quite a bit. Those two events, the US versus Paramount decision and television. Now, as they competed with television between 1948 and 1969, what theaters realized, or excuse me, the movie business as a whole realized, that they could not compete insofar as the news was concerned, insofar as cartoons, insofar as soap operas or episodic shows. All that migrated to TV. But they could compete on the issue of spectacle. Hollywood could give spectacle like there was no tomorrow, and so they started creating bigger and bigger movies. Quo Vadis hit in 1951. It was this big, spectacular swords and sandals epic, right? Not a very good one. I mean, if you look at it now, it's boring, okay? And it's not on my list, but it's an important picture because it taught Hollywood that if you created this huge spectacle, you could get asses into the seats. You could make money. And so that's what started happening. Elizabeth Taylor married a man named Mike Todd. And Mike Todd is crucial because he was a guy who realized that you could make a lot of money on these big spectacle pictures. He created the concept of the cameo of a famous movie star who shows up for like a single scene in some movie. Yeah, he did that for Around the World in 80 Days. All of these spectacle movies started happening, Once Upon a Time in the West and whatnot. And these big CinemaScope movies, the wider aspect ratios, that was all created to create a greater sense of drama, a greater sense of spectacle. It tried to get people to go to the movies because the movies had what TV did not have. Because the TV screen was this little tiny screen at first. I mean, really, it was this size. That's how big a TV screen was. I mean, not more than 8 inches across. And, a movie screen was huge. And so they started building bigger and bigger screens. And of course, they made this full transition to color because there had been color movies before, but they had been sporadic. Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind are two notable examples of the golden age. But during the war years, most of the movies were black and white. And it was only after the war years, after the US versus Paramount decision, after the advent of TV, that movie studios started full on doing color pictures. Everything had to be color because it had to be spectacular. And most important of all, it had to have something that TV did not have. And TV in 1948, up until 1960, 60 something, 69 at least, TV was in black and white. Huh? I mean, I remember growing up that there were channels that were in black and white. I was living in LA, and I'm talking to you about 1973 or so. There were some channels on the UHF channels that were black and white. Those were the local channels. Yeah. Yeah, the national channels, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox didn't exist at that time. Yeah, those were color. But that was in 1973, 72 that I remember. And it was a new thing, okay? TV had really gone color because of those moon landings. But before that, when Kennedy was shot in 63, black and white, baby. Look at the old footage of Walter Cronkite announcing the death of Kennedy. It's black and white, and that's 1963. So between 1948 onward, the movies tried to do everything color and tried to do more and more spectacle to bring in people. And it worked for a while. Cleopatra, as I mentioned before, was the big disaster of 1962-63 that made things, very dicey for the film business. Things were sliding, okay? There were a lot of musicals, Dr. Dolittle, Singing in the Rain, all those pictures, yeah? The Sound of Music. They were very successful, very spectacular, but that was winding down. And finally, in 1969, New Hollywood arrived. And New Hollywood was basically, the movie that kicked it off was Easy Rider. And Easy Rider is a key movie because it was done on the cheap, in color, and it talked about contemporary life. Because what had happened was that Hollywood had become completely divorced from reality. Do keep in mind that there were some pictures during the 50s that were very realistic. Man with a Golden Arm is famously one of those, right? But Man with a Golden Arm was a black and white picture. It was shot, it did cost $1 million, which is a lot of money at that time. But it was not, they didn't push it as hard as the other spectacle pictures, okay? It was sort of like gritty, yeah? But even in Man with a Golden Arm, which is supposed to be about drug addiction, they never mentioned the drug that Frankie Machine is addicted to. I mean, they never say that the guy is a heroin junkie, okay? They just sort of like allude to it. But, they were so constricted, rather, because of the different codes and whatnot. New Hollywood just shattered that. And it was with Easy Rider. And Easy Rider was the first picture, and also to a lesser extent, Bonnie and Clyde, okay? But I would argue that Easy Rider was the more important picture, okay? And so what happened was that Easy Rider and the pictures that followed it just became, they were grittier. They were more real. There was more of a sense that you are watching reality. Taxi Driver was kind of like the epitome of that, of like real, of like you were feeling the reality of life. You see what I'm saying? And that's the power, that was the power rather, of New Hollywood, that they could take advantage of the new system of G, PG, R, and X rating, and they could make R-rated films about adult subject matter and treat it in a very realistic sense, in a very realistic manner. And people started going to the theaters because what they were seeing was something realistic, adult. And the pinnacle of the New Hollywood period was the 4 pictures of Coppola: Godfather, Godfather 2, The Conversation, and Apocalypse Now. Those were sort of like the pinnacle of New Hollywood, where the movies that were being made were more realistic, grittier, and they expressed more profound human truths. And notice the interesting thing here is that, see, people want to see the truth. They want to see what's real, okay? Now, when I say that they want to see something real, it's not that they eschew fantasy movies. You can make a fantasy movie that is very true to human emotions. I would argue that the first Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, is incredibly true to human nature. Like Boromir, for instance, the tragedy of Boromir, of how he is tempted by the ring, and he fights that temptation, but succumbs to it and fails, and yet at the very end redeems himself as he battles against the Uruk-hai. That's powerful shit, and it's totally fantastic, but people went for it because it was real, it was human, see? It was a human emotion. And so people started going back to the movies starting in 1969, not because the filmmakers were so edgy, quote unquote, no, but because the filmmakers were making movies about people, about real human emotions. Whereas before, Hollywood had been making, swords and sandals epic about fucking Cleopatra, and who gives a shit, I mean, that's what was going on. Hollywood had become divorced from reality. And the movies that became closer to reality, closer to what human beings were experiencing, and not just in the United States, this was global, okay? The United States has always been on the cutting edge of the film business because cinema is an American art form, okay? The Americans have invented 3 art forms: abstract expressionism, cinema, movies, and jazz, okay? Those are the 3 art forms that America invented. And insofar as jazz and films are concerned, the best come from America, okay? I mean, I've always thought abstract expressionism is interesting, but semi-bullshitty, right? But jazz and cinema, no, they're not bullshitty. They're for real. They're real arts. They're real art forms, rather. And the best people make it in Hollywood. And jazz, the best make it in, well, they used to make it in Chicago and New York, but that's another webinar. But the point I want to make, see, New Hollywood came in '69, and it was showing real shit to people, and it blew up in 1980 with Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate is one of the most beautiful pictures ever made. It's incredibly beautiful, and it is a total piece of shit. It's just garbage. It doesn't talk about people. It's just cool images and moods and bullshit, okay? It doesn't make any sense. A lot of the speeches and the language is like, what the fuck? It's about the Johnson County War, okay? It's just, well, it was a disaster. It flopped at the box office because nobody wanted to see it because it was 3 hours of bullshit. Beautiful bullshit, but bullshit. Because there was no story. There was nothing about human beings. And it was slow and dull as shit. So, yeah, that was the end of New Hollywood. But the blockbusters, that period of the blockbusters had already started. And it started with Jaws. Jaws was the first blockbuster. And what's a blockbuster? A blockbuster is a movie that everybody wants to see right away. Because, see, in the past, movies had been released in one theater and then another theater, and they'd slowly built throughout the country, okay? And the movies played for like a long time. People forget, but like even as recently as 1986, Top Gun played in theaters for over a year. Yeah. Now, or not now, but back in 2019, before this whole COVID bullshit happened, movies would be in a theater house for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. If they didn't earn their money, they were out. Okay. But before, movies would play for a long time. Some movies played for years, not kidding. They'd roll out slowly across the United States and then Europe and then the secondary markets in the United States and Latin America, and it would just go on, like spread very slowly for years, okay? And so that's how it worked before, but the blockbusters front ran all of the, well, that's not the correct term, but what they did was they accelerated the whole process. And what Jaws was important was because it was the first picture where you had over 1,000 theaters showing it on the same day and date, okay? All on the same time in 1,000 theaters, boom, everybody got to watch Jaws. Now, Jaws is a great picture. I mean, it really is, okay? I think it's on my list. But the point of Jaws is, see, it was a great picture, but the point of how it was marketed, how it was sold, the financial considerations. It was an extremely expensive picture. And it had been played with all kinds of problems. The fucking shark was just a fucking nightmare, okay? And funnily enough, a lot of the tension of the movie is because you don't see the shark, right? And why don't you see the shark? Because the fucking thing kept failing and sinking. And it was like all kinds of problems, right? And so because of this, Steven Spielberg was forced to show the shark very little. And that's precisely why The film was so fucking scary. It's still scary. You watch it now and you're like, God damn, this is fucking scary. And the music, Jesus Christ, that was fucking genius. But anyway, the point is that started the blockbuster. And soon other people were copying it, of releasing one picture in 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 theaters, all at the same time. Boom, right? With a national media presence, national advertising. And national advertisement, what that mean? TV networks. And advertising on a TV network was cheaper than advertising in 50 or 100 different local markets. See? Yeah, because see, in say one ad in one local channel might have cost you, I'm just making something up, maybe $500 for the 30-second spot, right? But with the network, it would cost you $50,000 for that 30-second spot, right? But you'd cover more ground, more territory. So it was cheaper in the long run, because with the $500 for the 30-second spot, you had to go to, say, 150, 200 markets. It would be more expensive than to do the one national ad. And the only way that the one national ad would work is if that movie, that print of that movie, the actual reels that are projected with the film that are projected onto the screen, they have to be all in all of the theaters at the same time, ready to roll on that release date. Okay. And so that's how the business model changed and allowed that to happen. See, that's how blockbusters came to be. And it was because of necessity, because they had to recoup money and save on advertisement. And so mass media saturation was cheaper than doing local shit in the local newspaper, the local TV show, the local radio station. See, that's how it happened. That's how the blockbuster started to happen. And you had the usual suspects. You had Jaws, you had Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you had all these fucking pictures, Star Wars, etc. All these movies, Star Trek, they all came back. They were all spectacles. They were all big, right? And they had day and date. That is, that they were released simultaneously across the nation with a big marketing budget, a big initial push to get it out the door and to get asses into seats. And it worked. It worked like a charm until 2009. The last big movie, the last big blockbuster was Avatar. Avatar is literally a knockoff of Dances with Wolves, right? It's the Great White Savior, right? Only in outer space. It's the same fucking thing. It's actually kind of like a crappy movie, but very spectacular, very well made, very well edited, and it's a very well crafted picture, even though it has a shitty story that's stupid. But that's not important. The point is that, see, the blockbuster period went from 1975 to 2009. But see, it started dying because of streaming. Okay? And we are seeing now that there are a whole bunch of big blockbusters, like the James Bond movie, Matrix 4 and whatnot, Dune, these big blockbusters that they're very nervous about releasing because they're not going to make back their money. Yeah? Because the old model doesn't work, because people have started with their home theaters and they don't want to go to the fucking movie house, because to them the whole experience is so fucking expensive, because you got the tickets. Yeah. Right now are like fucking 10, 15 bucks a pop, for crying out loud. You got tickets, you got the food. Food is incredibly expensive. You got parking that's expensive, and it's a fucking hassle. I mean, a family of 4 going to the movies, you got, say, 40 bucks for the tickets, another 60 bucks easy for the food. And then you got maybe 20 bucks for parking, 120 bucks for just, to see some movie that might not even be very good, and what the fuck, right? So isn't it safer to just stay at home and watch something in the home theater? And instead of, spending 120 bucks on tickets and overpriced food and parking, you can just spend, 30 bucks on like 3 Domino's pizzas that get delivered right to your door. Which is better? I mean, it's pretty fucking obvious, right? And so that's what's happening. That's why the blockbuster era is over. Now, there was another period that was overlapping with the blockbuster period, which is the indie DVD revolution. And this is really important. See, starting in 1989. Actually, yeah, change that number from 92 to 89 because it really started. And as I'm talking to you, I'm remembering this, and I should have put it down. It started with Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which I did not include in my list, but now that I think about it, I should have included it because that was the first real indie picture. Sex, Lies, and Videotape won the Palme d'Or for its first-time filmmaker, Steven Soderbergh. Steven Soderbergh, great filmmaker, went on to do Traffic, which is a fantastic, I mean, that's a fucking classic picture. I mean, really outstanding. He did Ocean's 11, which is just primo entertainment. That is a filmmaker at the top of his game who's saying, fuck it, I'm going to make something fun. And he fucking made something fun. That's a great picture. I mean, totally ridiculous, but fun. I mean, that movie is fucking fun. Yeah, and he did a bunch of really interesting experiments, right? I personally like the Girlfriend Experience very much. And the Liberace movies, he's done a bunch of shit that's really good. But anyway, it started, the indie DVD revolution started in 89. Now, DVDs really started happening in 97, 98, okay? So here it's a bit of a misnomer. It's really the rental revolution, okay? The indie market for films really started happening because there was so much money coming in via VHS tapes and then DVD rentals, right? Rentals and sales. That what happened was that, see, a small movie that was very edgy could be made on a budget and recoup its money for its investors by way of sales of the rights to DVD and VHS and whatnot. And you could sell these rights country by country at the various markets, at MIPCOM, at Cannes. You could sell these rights and get a lot of money, or let me phrase that, not get a lot of money, but enough money to cover the cost of making your picture and a nice little bit of profit. That's how Miramax got big, see, because of the VHS DVD revolution. They could make these small pictures that were a little more edgy, and because of it, because they were a little bit edgier, or let me phrase that, they needed to be a little bit edgier to distinguish them from all the other indie movies being made. And that's how these small movies started to happen. And it started with Sex, Lies, and Videotape. I remember when that picture came out, the title alone got people sitting up. Sex, Lies, and Videotape. What the fuck is this all about, you know? And it seemed like this very voyeuristic, you know, kind of porno movie. It's not, okay? It's a very adult movie about sexual relationships. It's extremely adult and sophisticated. And it's a kind of picture that today is not made because people are too much of pussies to make movies like this. But anyway, the point about Sex, Lies, and Videotape and the indie revolution. Yeah, totally there on your PDF. Change it to 1989. Yeah, and add to the list of movies Sex, Lies, and Videotape, because I'm assuming that you guys have already seen the list as I've been talking to you. Yeah, the indie DVD revolution, it hit big. It was a lot of money, and that's why so many movies were made, and they were made by so many outstanding directors and writers. Movies that never would have happened otherwise. For instance, I mentioned Peter Greenaway before. Peter Greenaway was an artist, and he's just a highfalutin guy, and he made these movies like Belly of an Architect. This movie, what's the name of it? The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover. Murder by Numbers. All these movies, they only would have happened with this indie DVD VHS revolution, okay? Because his movies were too fucking weird to be produced by a studio. Too fucking weird for a mass audience. But a small audience would watch it. And that small audience spread all around the world, which is kind of like the what's going on with YouTube now, okay? Well, that would work. And that's what happened. Guys like Peter Greenaway, like Mike Lee, like all kinds of filmmakers, really great filmmakers, who wanted to make smaller movies that were about more specific topics that wouldn't have a mass market appeal. They were able to make them during the late 80s and into the 90s and into the early 2000s, really. The indie revolution was remarkable because there was a lot of money out there. In fact, what's his name? Ridley Scott, the preeminent studio director of the last half century, Well, he wound up going to Cannes to sell the rights for for a green card. No, for 1492, in order to basically, make shit tons of money for himself. Uh, um, what's his name? Oh God, his name is slipping my mind. Peter Weir. Peter Weir, who's a fantastic filmmaker, who made pictures like Picnic at Hanging Rock, The Year of Living Dangerously, The Truman Show, which is on my list. Well, he took Green Card, which is a silly little romantic comedy, though it has some edgy, interesting stuff. He went the indie route because basically he wanted personal financial independence. That's how he bought it, because he made that picture on a budget and sold it to a shit ton of different people, different territories for a fuck ton of money, and he pocketed the difference. And the picture on top of it did pretty well, because Peter Greenaway is a very good director and he knows what the fuck he's doing, right? And so a lot of filmmakers started doing that route to get personal financial independence and be able to do the pictures that might have been more difficult for them to do in a studio setting. I'm mentioning Green Card, the Peter Weir picture, because that was a classic movie that a studio would have made, no questions asked. And it had bankable stars. It was Andy McDowell and Gerard Depardieu. The studio would have made it, but the filmmakers figure, I can make more money going the indie route, and they did. See, that's that. The indie revolution was very freeing for a lot of filmmakers, and a lot of very capable filmmakers found financial independence, permanent financial independence in the indie world. Good on them. So anyway, that was the state of affairs until 2010, 2009, 2010, because streaming started to happen. And of course, it wasn't like all of a sudden lights out. No, it was a slow fade. Okay, one can point to those years because the streaming services have been around for a long time. Okay, but it was into the early teens of this century that streaming really started to happen. And what was happening is that film production, it was just not that good. It was just not that good. And also what happened, a lot of people went the indie route with the very big budgeted pictures and they started flopping. What has always happened, see, people do a picture and it's successful. They repeat it and they're successful. And they make it bigger and bigger and it's more and more successful until finally start making really, really big ones and they flop. And they flop hard. And then the money starts drying up because it gets nervous, because it doesn't want to shell out that kind of money for these pictures that might flop. I mean, look at the last few examples, you see? And that is more or less what happened with the indie DVD revolution. Started dying out, and at the same time, streaming started to happen. Now, in 2000, the X-Men appeared. Now, superhero movies were not exactly new. The last serious superhero movies before the X-Men was Superman the movie from 1978. Now, before Superman the movie, there hadn't been any serious treatment of superheroes. It had always been campy. I mean, you look at the Batman TV show with Adam West and that kind of thing, okay? Men in Tights, I mean, it's fundamentally silly. But Superman was the first time that a movie was made about superheroes that was realistic and took it seriously, dead seriously. The subsequent Superman movies with Christopher Reeve were pretty crappy. I mean, they got progressively crappier, which is sad. And it's probably because Richard Donner was not involved. Richard Donner is a great filmmaker. He made the Lethal Weapon pictures. And he's a fantastic filmmaker. He knows exactly what the fuck he's doing. And Superman was a really, really good superhero movie. And a young man named Bryan Singer, who loves Superman the movie, well, he made the X-Men in the same spirit in 2000. And he made that movie deliberately trying to make it as realistic as he possibly could, within, of course, the scope of the irreality and foolishness of superheroes, right? And the X-Men worked. It worked like a charm. It made a lot of money. It wasn't the biggest hit of all time. Frankly, Bryan Singer is not a particularly gifted film director. He's got all kinds of flaws as a film director. It's unfortunate, but it's true. But anyway, the point. See, his picture, the X-Men, that was the first picture that really started this ball rolling, okay, of the IP corporatization of movies. Because, see, X-Men, there was a possibility of a lot of sequels. Now, sequels had always been a part of the filmmaking industry. I mean, fuck, you go back to Frankenstein in 1931, right? Frankenstein was a hit. 2 years later or a year later, you get what? Bride of Frankenstein, a fucking sequel, right? You got The Godfather in 72. In 74, you got The Godfather Part 2. But they were fairly rare. The only times that you really had sequels were kind of like the B movies, like Abbott and Costello meet the Blob, Abbott and Costello meet the Invisible Man, shit like that, right? And those are the B and C, D movies, really. But like the Primo movies, no, you didn't get many sequels until the superhero movies. And do keep in mind, Superman had Superman 2 and Superman 3, and I think Superman 4 even. And there was Rocky 1 and Rocky 2 and Rocky 3. Yeah, there had been sequels, but it wasn't that common, okay? It wasn't. You start looking through films, the successful pictures. There's Rocky and First Blood. There's Superman. I'm talking prior to the year 2000. There's, of course, The Godfather and a few others. But serious movies, for the most part, it was one and done. It was with the X-Men that you really had this repetition, this recycling, this sequel mania. Terminator 2 in particular, or let me rephrase that. Terminator 2 was the classic example of carbon cut and paste, of just repeating exactly what had happened in the previous iteration. If you, I remember watching Terminator 2 when it came out in 91, okay? I saw it in college, and I saw it the week it came out, right? And I was severely disappointed because it was the same fucking story as the first one. The first one was a great movie. It was fantastic, right? Special effects were dodgy. Yeah, because it was a cheap movie, but it was a fantastic movie, fantastic story, a great, great love story. People don't understand that the real appeal of Terminator and the reason chicks liked it so much was it had this incredibly moving love story at the center of it. It worked like a charm, right? But the second one, yeah, better special effects, but it was the same fucking story, okay? It was nothing, no, not groundbreaking. People say that it's the greatest action movie ever made. I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Fucking idiots. But anyway, the point, it was really in 2000 that corporations started to realize that repeating movies, IP, that is intellectual property, that was where the game was at. And they started repeating the movies over and over and over again. And that's why you started having the MC universe and the DC universe and all this bullshit. And X-Men 2 and 3 and Wolverine versus whatever and all these fucking movies going on and on and on, right? They're all, they're all doing IP movies. And why? Because movies are becoming, number one, extremely expensive, but number two, there's so much fucking money to be made in these big spectacle pictures, and the corporations have bought the studios that they want to maximize their investment. Now, they started buying the studios in the mid-90s. The first famous one was Sony. Sony bought Columbia TriStar. That was a famous disaster. Yeah, it was highlighted in the book Hit and Run by, I forget the name of it, but the book was Hit and Run. It's about Peter Gruber and John Peters, who were the executives that convinced Sony to buy Columbia TriStar and put them at the head. And it was a fucking nightmare. It was a disaster. They blew the whole fucking thing up because they were fucking morons, right? But anyway, the corporations during the late 90s, they got into the filmmaking business and they all bought the studios. This has happened before, but what had happened was that corporations, multinationals, had bought studios, but the studios had pretty much run the shit on their own, okay? It was in the 90s that they brought a corporate mentality to the studios. And so what happened in the 90s and into the 2000s is that this corporate mentality of delivering consistent profits, of consistent, predictable profitability, and that was the reason that these studios started focusing on intellectual properties that they already had and doing all these remakes and all these sequels and just going over the same shit over and over again because they just want to deliver consistent profits, because the filmmaking business is inherently unstable because you are positive that the movie you're making is going to be a hit and it flops. And then you're making a movie that you know is going to be a colossal flop and it hits. There's a famous story of what's his name, Donald Sutherland, the actor. He was offered, he was needed to do National Lampoon's Animal House, and as a favor to his friend, the director, he was like, "Okay, I'll do it, but I'll do it for a day." And the friend said, the director, I forget which one, John Landis, I think, it said to him, "Well, I'll give you like 2 percentage points." And Donald Sutherland was like, "Fuck that! Give me $200,000. I don't want the 2 percentage points." And because he read the script and he thought this shit is gonna just, bomb. It's gonna be a blip, but it's not really gonna hurt my career. And if it does hurt my career, at least I'll get 200 grand out of it, right? So he demanded the money and not the points, not the percentage of profits, right? And what happened? The film was a fucking huge hit. And Donald Sutherland laughed for years, saying that he basically negotiated his way out of earning something like $15 million. That's what the percentage would have gotten him, $15 million. And he lost it because he was sure that the movie was hit. It was going to be a flop because nobody knows shit about Hollywood. William Goldman said it best. So anyway, the corporations, they don't want that instability. And so that's why they insist on intellectual property movies being the ones that get made. Look at the Pirates of the Caribbean movie. I mean, it sounds fucking insane, yeah? But from a corporate perspective, it's perfectly logical. You own the property rights to Pirates of the Caribbean, make a movie, make some money off this shit. And that's what they did. That's what they've been doing since 2000. And it started with X-Men, okay? And so those are the periods that we have so far. And all of these periods are ending because of streaming. Streaming is killing it all, okay? Streaming, in the end, you're only going to have streaming. You're going to have like these little art house cinemas that are going to show old movies, like one-offs, but you're not going to have new movies because streaming services prioritize series, not movies, let alone standalone movies. And so you're going to have this situation where it's all these TV shows that go on and on and on. And because they go on and on and on, they run out of creativity and they get really shitty at the end. I mean, look at Game of Thrones, for crying out loud. That went on for 8 seasons, right? And the first few seasons were fucking fantastic, but the last one was a fucking disaster. The last 2, really. Just a complete and utter clusterfuck. Because they run out of creativity, because it's natural. You can't maintain 8 years of creativity. The Sopranos was sort of like, The Sopranos was at the end there. It was kind of like, Jesus, it was getting there. And the thing that saved it was the way that they ended the show, right? I personally think that Tony Soprano got shot in the restaurant, and because the whole show was basically from his point of view. And I think that what happened was that he got shot in the end. And of course, lights out. That's that. Like I said in last week's webinar that everybody hated, about Epicureanism, that's lights out. Once you're gone, and you don't know anything. It's black screen, right? But anyway, going back to the original point that I'm trying to make here is that, see, all of these streaming services want series. They want episodic shows that go on and on and on. And so because of that, movies, that is the audiovisual product between 90 minutes and on the outside 180 minutes, that's gone. It's over as an art form, okay? Unless something happens that seriously changes everything around, that makes people want to go back to theaters, okay? And I don't see it on the horizon, because even with this end of the lockdown shit, people are really fucking nervous about being in close proximity to one another. And they're fleeing the cities. I think in part because of remote work, and they can live more cheaply in other places. And also because there is a certain segment of the population, a large segment of the population, that is or has been turned into hypochondriacs. Because, you have all these Karens that are freaking out if you don't wear a mask. I mean, they're like screaming at you and like, I'm going to call the cops on you, blah, blah, blah. And fuck you. I'm not going to wear a mask because I'm outdoors, and what the fuck am I going to wear a mask for? I'm like 20 feet away from the closest possible next human being. And the cunt comes up to you, from way across the street, comes up to you and says, well, you're not wearing a mask. You're not wearing a mask. What the fuck, So anyway, the point. A lot of people are going to be very leery of going back to a movie house and sitting right next to a stranger who might have the coof, right? And so I don't see this this art form coming back. I just don't see it, you know? And this breaks my fucking heart, okay? Because it's an art form that I adore. And truth to tell, I've been thinking very seriously that it might be smart for me to position myself to go back to LA and go back to making movies, you know? Because it was making movies was directing pictures, actually. It was the one time in my life that I felt like I was on all cylinders, that I was the happiest time in my life, you know? And I missed that time very much. And I was thinking that maybe I could go back and get back in the game, you know? But now I'm realizing the game is over. And this breaks my heart. This is not a conclusion that I wanted to arrive at, but that's what I see, okay? So anyway, let me move on. Let me see. Let me just check real quick. You guys, have you been able to hear me this whole time? Hit +1 because I haven't been able to see the chat while I've been ranting. Yes, you have been able to see me? Okay, good. Okay, so the essential movies. You have that there in your PDF, and I'll just read them real quick, okay? Well, you have it in front of you in the PDF, so let me explain my rationale. Now, Birth of the Nation is undisputably the most essential of all the movies, and you should see it, because it established the basic film grammar. D.W. Griffith might have been an old racist and an old member of the KKK, right? But he knew what the fuck he was doing. He understood film. He understood the filmmaking grammar. He invented it. Oh, the other picture I forgot to put in here. Shit. Is Sergei Eisenstad's Battleship Potemkin. That's another picture that was crucial, okay, of the early pictures, okay? I forget what year was Battleship Potemkin. I want to say 1922. Guys in chat, can you look that up real quick? 1926. Thank you. Yeah, Battleship Potemkin, it established a lot of very famous shots, that got ripped off by just about everybody. Like, for instance, you see a hill, and suddenly something comes out. Oh, no, that was Kurosawa. No, that was Kurosawa. No, sorry, forget about that. But lots of other techniques. The Battleship Potemkin was like, yeah. Then there's Wings. Wings was the picture that won the first Oscar for Best Picture, and it really was a great picture. It's an incredible picture when you realize that they shot all that shit practically. They were actually flying when they shot that shit, okay? Wings is a movie that you should see, like, holy shit, they had balls, okay? I mean, they had real balls when they made that fucking picture, right? And it's an amazing picture. Metropolis in 1927 is, the first, arguably the first science fiction movie. It is visually breathtaking. It is, wow. It showed what you could do with film. And it was shot in black and white, and you can do a lot with fucking film. Now, Frankenstein and Dracula both came out in 1931. I personally think that they're very important. I mean, nod to the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari of 1920. But Frankenstein and Dracula were very important because, see, it was the time when the studios realized that if you scared the shit out of people, they would pay money to see it again, okay? Because, see, nobody, the idea of terrifying people and that people would enjoy being terrified as an entertainment had never crossed anybody's mind. Actually, I should have put the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari first. But Frankenstein and Dracula, I mean, there were two separate pictures, of course. They both came out in 31, and they both were the first ones kind of like that took advantage of the insight of the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Because it was basically, nobody had ever thought that if you scared people, they would come back for more and pay good money to be scared. Nobody had thought of that, okay? There had been haunted houses before and those kinds of rides before, but in cinema, it had never been like thought of. And it had always been seen as sort of like a low entertainment, those haunted house rides and such that have existed from the time of, donkey's years, right? But those were the first two pictures that sort of like made it a genre. And you had all these monster pictures that came afterwards, The Creature of the Black Lagoon in the 50s and whatnot. All of these horror movies, they all go back to Frankenstein and Dracula, which in turn go back to the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. The 39 Steps is really the first spy thriller. Okay, the first James Bond movie. I remember watching it. There were two versions of the 39 Steps. The 1935 version, and I think there was one in the 50s, I think. And I remember watching both of them when I was a child, when I was like 7, 8 years old. I watched them on TV in Chile. And yeah, they really shocked the shit out of me. It was just like, whoa, Nelly, you know? And it's a good picture. It's a really good picture. Now, Snow White was the first Disney hit. And Snow White matters because it was the first cartoon movie. The first cartoon movie that was, like the main feature. And it showed that cartoon movies could be extremely profitable. Ironically, Disney as a corporation, as a studio, they didn't make money on their movies. They made money on their toys. Disney has always been a toy company. If you're interested in investing, you got to understand that Disney is a toy licensing company. And all of its movies, they are basically advertisements for its toys. Disney has two things. It has its amusement parks and its toys. The amusement parks are, Disney World, Disneyland, and so forth. The toys, well, the way it works is very simple. The business model is very simple and started with the Mickey Mouse watch. The Mickey Mouse watch, I forget the name of the guy who came up with the idea, and this saved Walt Disney's studio, by the way, the Mickey Mouse watch. He came up with the idea that, he would get in touch with a watchmaking company, license Mickey Mouse to them, and get a big chunk of the profits. And it worked like a charm, okay? And it saved Walt Disney Studios back in the Depression, and onward and upward. But the thing is, Snow White was the first feature-length picture. And it only happened because of the Mickey Mouse watch, okay? Remember, because Disney would have gone bankrupt by then had it not been for the Mickey Mouse watch. Anyway, Gone with the Wind, like I explained before, The Wizard of Oz, as I explained before, Fantasia, that was the first adult cartoon. And that's why it's kind of important, okay? I think it's an important picture. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture. And it's lovely. And the fact that they're prohibiting it now because they say that the crows are racial stereotypes. Oh, fuck you, man. I mean, come on. It's a great picture. Man. But anyway, I mean, those are the times. Casablanca is a great picture because, see, it's incredibly well paced. You watch Casablanca and there's never a dull moment. Never. You are watching it anywhere you look at these movies in particular. I'm saying that all these movies they're pretty great. They're important. Some of them more important than others, but they all share similar qualities. They reveal deep human truths, and they are always entertaining. They are incredibly well paced, and they are all spectacular in their own unique way. Okay, Casablanca is such a good picture. I mean, it just moves so swiftly. Yeah, it's always entertaining. It's always interesting. It reveals truths about people. It is Allied propaganda. I mean, make no mistake about that. It is a propaganda picture, but it's a very, very good propaganda picture. Oh, and the other picture that I should have put in there to balance it out, perhaps, is Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will and/or Olympia. Leni Riefenstahl was a great filmmaker. She is the greatest female film director ever, okay? And a lot of people don't like to face that fact because she was a Nazi. She was a committed Nazi. But Leni Riefenstahl was the greatest female film director ever, okay? It wasn't Jane Campion who did the piano. The piano was a trivial little fiffle. It was nothing, okay? Triumph of the Will. You should add that to the list. Yeah, definitely. Triumph of the Will is an extraordinary picture. It's just incredible. Okay, I've seen it many times. I own a copy of it, of course I do, and it is just extraordinary because it's pure cinema. There's a little bit of dialogue from speeches and shit that Hitler gave, but what it's really about is one man and his people. And so what you see is, every single shot in the movie is juxtaposing the image of Hitler versus the crowd of Germans who support him and adore him. It's a powerful, powerful movie. And it's just a fantastic picture. Yeah. Double Indemnity was sort of like the first film noir. Okay. Double Indemnity is with Fred McMurray. It's a fantastic picture. And it's the first film noir that I think it reached its apogee, film noir as a genre, with Sunset Boulevard. Sunset Boulevard is an extraordinary picture. It is one of the first pictures that really is self-conscious about Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood has always been self-conscious, but Sunset Boulevard really nailed it. It's about a forgotten silent screen star who wants to make a comeback. And it's just an amazing picture. Ben-Hur, that's, again, an amazing picture. It's so entertaining. I mean, it's got the greatest scene with the chariot ride, which is spectacular, but it's also, it shows this great development of the Ben-Hur character. It's just a really, really great picture. And it's one of the Swords and Sandals epics, rather. And it is just near the end of that phase. The end, as I said before, came in 1962 with Cleopatra. But Ben-Hur, Spartacus, they were kind of like at the peak of that, right? Dr. Strangelove is, I personally think, the first truly, well, no, Paths of Glory was pretty great, but it was not as great as Dr. Strangelove, because Dr. Strangelove is a comedy about nuclear war. And at the time, nuclear war was no laughing matter. It was a real possibility. And in 1962, this was just 2 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the United States and the Soviet Union came inches from a real nuclear war, and nobody was fucking around. It was the real deal, okay? And scared the ever-living shit out of everybody. And Dr. Strangelove is basically a comedy about nuclear annihilation. And it is screamingly funny. It is one of the funniest movies ever made. It's horrifying, but funny. And that's why it's funny, because it is horrifying, okay? Yeah, it's a great picture. I would say Dr. Strangelove, it has only a couple of insert shots that don't feel contemporary, okay? And other than that, yeah. Oh, shit, and I forgot to put something here that's definitely on this list, which is The Manchurian Candidate. Fuck, I should have put that. Manchurian Candidate from 1963 or 64. The Manchurian Candidate, oh man, with Frank Sinatra. It is a fantastic movie. One of the greatest movies ever made. Put it on the list. The Manchurian Candidate. You must watch it. The Manchurian Candidate is another Cold War picture that is just trippy, and it has the best editing. I would argue that the editing in The Manchurian Candidate is quite possibly among the 3 greatest edited movies in history. It's that good, okay? Because I'm spoiling it now. There's a sequence where one of the characters is being brainwashed, and the various characters, actually it was various characters are getting brainwashed by Chinese communists. And I'm not gonna spoil it. Fuck it. I'm not gonna spoil it, because if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. If you haven't seen the movie, if I tell you, I'm gonna ruin it for you. Okay. You have to see it. It is so extraordinary. And if you see it, you're gonna say, "Oh, I've seen this before. It's no big deal." Yeah, but see, that was the first time that they did it. See, and that's why it's so remarkable. Because now you see it and you're like, "Oh, big deal," but that was the first time. Okay. Yeah. It's like, it's extraordinary. And by the way, it has the first martial arts fight scene in motion picture history. Not kidding. The fight between Frank Sinatra and the Chinese communist agent. They fight in karate. Yeah, it was the first Asian mixed martial arts karate fight ever in an American movie, or any movie, I think. Yeah, and it's a really cool fight scene. It's really good. So anyway, yeah, The Manchurian Candidate. Fuck, I forgot that. Then Easy Rider, for reasons I mentioned before. Godfather and Godfather Part 2, for reasons I mentioned before. Chinatown. Now that's another really, really good picture. It has an incredibly good story that you would think is absurd, because it's about Los Angeles water rights. Not kidding. That's what the movie is about. It's about the battle over the water rights in Los Angeles, fictionalized, of course. And it has, you know, it has some indelible characters. The whole thing is fucking fantastic. Okay. And yeah, it's one of the great pictures of all times, Chinatown. Now, Barry Lyndon is a picture that I've seen maybe a dozen times. Now, the first time I watched it, I was bored out of my mind. I thought that this was the boringest, dumbest fucking thing ever. Just boring. In fact, I didn't watch it in a single sitting. It was like, I think I saw it over like 3 sittings at least. Okay. I was bored, silly. I did not like it. The second time I watched it, I was like, oh, it's not that bad. Okay. And of course, you know, as I kept on watching it, I kept on finding interesting things about it. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture. It really is one of the great pictures of all times. I personally think it is better than 2001 Space Odyssey. I think 2001 Space Odyssey has a lot of really boring shit going on. That, again, you know, like I said, in Barry Lyndon, I've watched it easily a dozen times, and I'm never bored by it. Never. Not now. I mean, I can recite to you every single shot in that picture. Okay. I mean, I've seen it that many times. It is never boring. It is incredibly interesting. Okay. Once you get into the rhythm of it. But 2001 has long stretches that are really fucking boring, that nothing happens. And I've seen that movie also several times. I don't know how many times at this point, but I've seen Barry Lyndon more than 2001. And 2001, like for instance, the whole sequence on the space station, it's really boring. And the video call with his daughter, it was, again, really boring. And it was not interesting. A lot of it is really boring. Okay. Yeah. I mean, the end sequence is pretty cool. The initial sequence is pretty cool, but the middle section, or not the middle section of the 4 sections, because there's the Dawn of Man section. There's the what's his name, the Dr. Floyd section on the space station. Then there's the section of the astronauts on the spaceship. That was really good. And the Stargate sequence, and that was also really good. But the second one is weak as fuck. I mean, just really weak. But anyway, Jaws, because of, like I mentioned before, it's a picture that created the blockbuster. But also, Jaws, and in common with all these pictures, it is never boring. Okay, never. Every single shot is interesting and it's going somewhere. Okay, every single shot of these pictures. I mentioned that Barry Lyndon, the first time you watch it, it's boring as fuck. But once you get into it, by repeated viewings, you understand what every shot means and why it matters. And it's interesting. And it's, like I said, all these pictures are extremely human. They reveal truths about human beings. Superman, which is important for the reasons I discussed before. And also, it's a great fucking picture. It is a really, really great fucking picture. And it's kind of surprising, but it is. Apocalypse Now is probably the greatest war movie ever made. You can say that Private Ryan is really incredibly gritty and all the rest of it. Yeah, but Apocalypse Now is kind of like the untouchable of the war movies. No movie can really come close to Apocalypse Now. It's so everything. It's untouchable, really. The Empire Strikes Back is the best of all the Star Wars pictures, by far. I mean, far and away. And it's also a meditation on masculinity. In Empire Strikes Back, every male relationship, every kind of relationship that a man can have is analyzed in that picture. You don't realize it. But look at the characters. You know, you have Luke and Han Solo. They are brothers who adore each other, and yet there's a rivalry between them. There is Luke and Yoda, the relationship between headstrong, devoted but headstrong and impetuous young man and a wise master. There's the relationship between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, between a young man and an older man, between a young man fighting evil and a young man and his father. Mm-hmm. There is the relationship between Han Solo and Leia. There's a relationship between that is a alpha Chad, the terminology that we use, and a woman who just can't get enough of him. And interestingly enough, and if you forget about the stupidity of making Leia and Luke twins, which is just stupid, it was tacked on, it was dumb. If you ignore that, you realize that Luke is the beta, and at the end of Empire Strikes Back, it's clear that she's going to settle for him. Okay. And then the third movie, you know, Return of the Jedi, just threw everything out the window and just was just a crap. It was just a crap fest as far as I'm concerned. But Empire Strikes Back, if you look at it as a standalone picture, it encapsulates all of the relationships that a man has. The alpha man, the alpha Chad, and the beta virgin. I mean, all of it. It's all there in that one picture. It's incredible. Now, When Harry Met Sally is sort of like a distillation of all the romantic comedies, because ultimately all romantic comedies are about what Harry and Sally is about, which is, can a man and a woman be friends without the sex thing getting in the way? And the answer, of course, is no. Okay. And it's Harry and Sally proves that. Okay. And all romantic comedies are basically what When Harry Met Sally is about. Yeah. Can a man and a woman be friends? No. Goodfellas is an incredible movie because it doesn't have a plot. It is just episodic. It's just shit that happens to a guy in his life, okay? But he happens to be a gangster. And it's just all kinds of crazy because it's pointless, okay? I'm not saying this in a negative way. I'm saying in the literal sense. It has no point, no direction. It's just a random guy racing through life, you know, in a headlong flight with no direction. It's extraordinary. It's about our lives, see? Because, you know, Henry Hill's life is interesting because he's a gangster. But he rushes through life with no direction, doing shit because it just seems like the smart thing to do at that moment, even though it's not really smart in the long run or even the medium run, right? It's us. It's humans. It's us doing stupid shit and just moving forward and just like, okay, just moving forward, you know? It's an incredible picture, and it is so true. And some of the sequences are just so unbelievable, like the May 26th, May 24th, 1980 sequence. Jesus Christ, the one with the helicopter. Jesus fucking Christ, man, that's amazing. Now, JFK is a picture that I despise on a philosophical level. I don't believe in any kind of JFK conspiracy or bullshit like that. I actually know what happened with JFK. Okay. I'll tell you to you some other time. Yeah, well, the simple story. There actually was a cabal to kill him. Okay. And yes, Lyndon Johnson and John Foster Dulles and the other Dulles, they were all mixed up in it. There was a conspiracy to kill Kennedy. But what happened was that Lee Harvey Oswald beat them to it. It's simple as that. Okay. That's the true conspiracy. And that's why the Warren report seems so fucking weird. Okay. It's like people were covering shit up and stuff like that. Well, and like, for instance, the mob, they were involved too. And Jack Ruby, when he killed Lee Harvey Oswald, it was because Sam Giancana and that whole crowd, they thought, oh, the thing is on. We're shooting the guy. Okay. And that's why they turned on Sam Ruby to kill Lee Harvey Oswald. And the conspirators weren't able to signal to the mob or get in touch with the mob and tell them, no, this is not our guy. See, because they thought that the mob thought that once this patsy had done the job, they had to kill the patsy, right? No loose ends, right? And the plan of the cabal was to kill him just before the Democratic Convention in 1964. Okay, yeah, that was the plan. There was actually a cabal, but you know, it's the ultimate Gettier problem. It's fucking fascinating. But anyway, the JFK movie is just a crock of shit. But what's interesting about the JFK movie and why it matters is, see, Oliver Stone is the only filmmaker who took MTV seriously as a visual medium, because all the other filmmakers look down on MTV and that, you know, choppy cutting and impressionistic cuts. And Oliver Stone looked at that and realized that's the future. And he implemented it in JFK. He also did it again, in even more spectacular fashion, but basically the same idea, in Natural Born Killers, another picture that I think is brilliant, but morally reprehensible. The point about JFK, the movie, see, all the uses of different cameras, different film stock, different lenses, and all the rest of it, different color corrections, all of that, see, and the choppy editing creates like a collage-like feeling, okay, that is impressionistic and hallucinatory. He understood what MTV was doing in JFK. Now you're going to notice that I have him again in 1999 for Any Given Sunday. Any Given Sunday, he basically turned off the high contrast, the different cameras, the different film stocks, the different color corrections, and he made it all look even, but he continued with the choppiness of it, the hyperkinetic choppiness and the impressionism of his filmmaking, which, if you think about it, after that, everybody is doing it. Paul Greenglass in the Jason Bourne pictures, what the fuck do you think he's doing? He's basically doing what Oliver Stone did in Any Given Sunday and JFK. Okay, well, more Any Given Sunday, but you see my point. See, Oliver Stone is a guy whom I don't respect as a man, and I don't respect as any kind of intellectual, and I don't respect him morally. I think that he's probably a piece of shit kind of guy, and I'm convinced that that fucker went to Vietnam and to fight in Vietnam deliberately so that he could kill somebody legally. Hopefully a lot of people legally. I actually think that he's a psychopath. I'm not kidding. I don't give a fuck about it. I tell it to his face. But he's a great filmmaker. He's a great filmmaker. He's a guy that I think is just scum, but he's a great filmmaker. Yeah. So anyway, Clerks is an important picture because it was one of the lowest, cheapest DIY kind of indie pictures. And I should have put here Sex, Lies, and Videotape, but it doesn't matter. It's the same thing, okay? Now, 1984 was a big year because there was Clerks, there was Shawshank Redemption, and there was Pulp Fiction. And, you know, these three pictures are very different, but they are all extraordinary. I mean, they're just amazing movies. In Shawshank Redemption, when I saw it, I thought it was an incredible picture, okay? I remember watching it, and I thought it was remarkable. And Pulp Fiction, again, when I saw it, yeah, it blew me away. And these are pictures that they stand the test of time. People have ranked Shawshank Redemption as their favorite movie on IMDb, and there's a reason for it. It's a great picture. And it's a picture that's so good because it's not about the typical bullshit. It's the friendship of two guys. And one of them is seeking hope, and one of them is seeking redemption. And it's just a powerful, powerful picture. Now, Toy Story is important because of the CGI, because it was a completely CGI picture. But even though on a technical level it was so, you know, incredibly well made, it's such a human story. It's so human and so alive. And the ultimate irony, of course, is it's just a bunch of toys, right? It's so human, so alive. And what's remarkable is that every single shot in this picture works. It works really, really well. Now, The Truman Show anticipated the life that we're living now, our camera lives, okay? It anticipated it almost perfectly. I mean, look, the whole YouTube genre of people vlogging their entire lives and people following this shit, right? It's The Truman Show, okay? And it's a picture that oddly people seem to have forgotten a little bit, or perhaps it's the circles that I move in. But The Truman Show is an incredible picture. Saving Private Ryan, for the reasons I explained below, it's the most realistic war movie ever made. It's not the best one, but the most realistic one. Any Given Sunday, I explained before. X-Men, I explained before. Master and Commander was kind of like the last one of those great, big, spectacular movies that were one-offs. Even though it was supposed to be like a series, but it was not successful enough to warrant being made a series. And it works fantastic. And finally, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. As far as I'm concerned, it's kind of like the high watermark of artistry in cinema history, because it really is an extraordinary picture. I mean, it's just remarkable. It's so human and so alive and so everything. And it really is like the high watermark. And after that, it's been like a decay. And you look at the pictures that are being celebrated now, they're all bullshit. And like I said, they're repetitions or thematic repetitions of better made pictures from the past. And people think that they're also original, and no, they're not. And it's been, co-opted by these woke fucksticks who don't care about the medium. They just want to have power. Okay. So it's just so fucking frustrating. But anyway, the point, these are the pictures. If you watch all of these movies, if you don't know anything about movies, anything, I mean, zero, you've never watched a movie, nothing. If you start with these movies in any order, just skip around, okay? You'll get a sense of what cinema is. And that's more or less what I was trying to do with this list. This isn't the list of the absolute best pictures, because there are a lot of pictures that are incredibly good that are not included in this list. Like, for instance, Manhattan by Woody Allen, and also Annie Hall, and also Crimes and Misdemeanors. Yeah, that's a great fucking picture. But see, Woody Allen has made a shit ton of fantastic fucking movies, right? And now that I think about it, I should have included at least Crimes and Misdemeanors in this list, because it really is an extraordinary picture, because he's an extraordinary filmmaker. See, there are lots of films that I haven't included here. There are lots of films that I haven't included, though, that I think are just overrated, like Citizen Kane. I think Citizen Kane is overrated. It's a very simple story. It is just a very ambitious man who, at the end of his life, is regretful. But it doesn't really show anything about the man. It doesn't reveal the man in the Joycean epiphanic sense. No, it does not at all. And there is a clear sense that he wanted to hurt Hearst, because Citizen Kane, of course, is based on the life of William Randolph Hearst. And see, Orson Welles, because he was a young man, he was 24, he was too callow to understand the costs that William Randolph Hearst had incurred to achieve the position that he had. It wasn't that somebody had given it to him. He had taken it, and it had cost him a lot. And Orson Welles was too young and naive and stupid to understand that cost. And his writer, Herman Mankiewicz, was too bitter at his own life and his own alcoholism to understand that cost. William Randolph Hearst, it's not that I'm saying William Randolph Hearst was like a wonderful guy. No, he was an asshole. He was a son of a bitch. He was a fuckstick, blah, blah. But there was more to him than merely the Kane caricature that Orson Welles created. So I don't think it's a very good picture. There are a lot of other pictures, like, for instance, The Best Years of Our Lives, that won the Oscar in 1946, I believe, or 47, which is about returning vets from World War II. That's a horrible fucking picture. It's boring as fuck. It won the Oscar because it was Oscar bait. See? I mean, most of the pictures that win the Oscar, they're not the best picture. They're not the best picture of that year. I do believe in the year that Apocalypse Now came out, I think Kramer versus Kramer won. Kramer versus Kramer is just a bullshit happy ending Hollywood movie. Okay? It's about divorce, and it tries to be serious about divorce, but in the end, it's not. And it's just stupid, And the ending is just, I want to vomit and puke right then and there. It's just total bullshit. Okay? And I don't know. I mean, there are lots of Best Picture movies that are just, most of them, quite frankly. Let me put it this way. You look at all these pictures, and I'm looking over them real quick, and none of them won Best Picture Oscar for that year. Well, The Godfather and Godfather Part 2, a few of them were nominated, but they didn't win. Casablanca, I'm not sure if Casablanca, chat, correct me if Casablanca won the best Oscar for 1944. Did Casablanca win? Yeah, and well, Gone with the Wind won, definitely. Jesus Christ, that was a giant film. That was incredible. And Wings won the first Oscar. But you see my point. Most of these pictures did not win the Oscar for Best Picture, and they are incredible pictures. They are unbelievably good pictures. And the important thing that I put in this list, okay, is that these pictures are always entertaining, and they're so human. That's the thing that I keep coming back to. They are so human. I mean, like when in The Godfather Part 2, there's a scene where Michael goes back to the old house where his family used to live, and he goes back and he goes into the office where his father's office used to be. And he knows exactly where all the furniture is. And you can tell how excited he is to be there. I mean, the character is, right? And he's like a boy trying to compare himself to the giant of the man his father was and failing. And that's the whole point of the movie. In that scene, he knows that he's failing because he sort of like says, oh, the furniture was here and the desk was there. And then he just sort of like lingers. And you know, in that lingering moment, you know, he's thinking my old man was better than I was. That's a powerful, powerful feeling, you know, and that's a powerful human truth. Because a lot of us feel that our old man was better than we are. In my own case, as I mentioned before in other videos, I certainly don't, but it is the case with a lot of men that they feel that their man was a better man than they were. And perhaps it might not even be the case, but they always carry that notion that their own man was better than they were. See? It's a human truth. And that's powerful shit. And that's what great art should be transmitting. Human truths. See? And the tragedy is that so much of our contemporary art does not discuss human truths because the artists right now are too afraid. They are simply too afraid to talk about truth, about real human motivation. And it's just so goddamn sad. It's just a tragedy as far as I'm concerned, you know? And yeah, it's just a tragedy. Yeah. I mean, like I said at the beginning of this video, this webinar, I was thinking very seriously of going back to Hollywood and you know, giving it one last go and seeing how it happened. You know, I'm not getting any younger, and my productive years are I don't have that many ahead of me. So I was thinking about it very seriously, but now I realize it's over. And I was hearing somewhere a discussion about possible Oscar nominees or whatnot for last year's pictures and whatnot. I'm like, who gives a shit? All these pictures are so Lilliputian, you know, just so tiny and pathetic. And that is just, it just breaks my heart. So that's been my webinar. You know, I hope that you don't wind up with too much of a bummer from my final little rant there. Yeah, so let's throw it into questions. I haven't looked at Casablanca won the Oscar. Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking through the questions. Oh, I loved Master and Commander is a fantastic picture. I put on the list. I'm looking through the chat. I don't know if video games will replace movies. I think that they're going woke, and that is just antagonizing people. Like that movie, that video game that came out recently. I mean, I don't follow video games. The one of the zombies, and they killed off the main character like right away, and just made his sacrifice pointless. Yeah. Full Metal Jacket was a piece of shit. Yeah, the first half an hour was pretty good with Sergeant Hartman, but the pianist, come on. The one about Adrian Brody there, the Oscar baity one, and it won a bunch of Oscars. It won Best Actor and Best Director. That was Oscar bait. Who gives a shit? The Pianist was just another Holocaust World War II movie. Bullshit. You know, who gives a fuck about that? No. The Omen, that was a pretty fucking funny movie, but it was not a great movie. Oh yeah, I heard that Mrs. Doubtfire, there's an NC-17 version of the picture. I hope they release that thing. That would be fucking funny. I mean, that apparently Robin Williams improvised so much shit that they have like a PG version, which was released, an R version, and a NC-17 version. I'd love to see that NC-17 version. Russell Cardenas is asking me, what are your favorite personal movies? Your personal favorite movies? All of them. All the ones I listed and more. I mean, endless. Okay? A Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Yeah, that was a pretty good picture. I mean, I'm not crazy about it. I mean, I can respect it, but I didn't really like it. I didn't enjoy it. Marius asked, which movies should a young man watch to red pill himself? All the movies I mentioned, man, all of them. Okay, and probably it's that there isn't one where Any Given Sunday. There's a scene in Any Given Sunday. Holy shit, that's a good scene. I forgot that one. Cameron Diaz is the owner of this football team, and she is discussing with the team doctor which players are going to, between two players, the quarterback and the one of the linebackers. She's discussing with this doctor, which player can play and which one can't. And it is the nastiest fucking thing ever. I mean, you can see the motivation, the corporatism, the corruption. And at the same time, see, what's happening is that you see this conversation between these two characters that's taking place in an empty locker room, right? And at the same time, in Any Given Sunday, it cuts to sequences of those two characters that are being discussed and the pressures that each of them have and what they're trying to achieve in these last years that they have in the game. And it's an extraordinary sequence. And, Cameron Diaz, I mean, I saw that picture and I thought, man, that chick can fucking act. I mean, she is on fire on that picture, right? And she just gobbles, what's his name? Al Pacino. She eats him for breakfast, man. Holy fucking shit. Literally. She literally eats him for breakfast in this scene. You got to see that fucking picture. Any Given Sunday is very much a Robert Altman-esque picture. It has like a whole bunch of characters and a whole bunch of storylines, and all of them are incredibly human. I didn't include Robert Altman because I've always had a problem with him because I think that he's a bully. And I think that he's kind of like an asshole fundamentally. I think that MASH, I never found it funny. On the contrary, I thought it was a movie made by bullies, that glorified bullies. That's what I always thought, that it was a prototypical leftist movie. That MASH was a movie that glorified bullies, and I thought it was a piece of shit. Simple as that. This is an idle idea that just popped into my head. Which one of you should, do you guys think I should do like one-off episodes discussing one picture, whether I like it or hate it, and just do it like that? So just like one-off little video, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes tops, talking about why I think that MASH is just a picture that glorifies bullies and why it's a piece of shit. Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, the football game wasn't so bad. It was just like, What about Fight Club and Matrix? They're great pictures. They're not like the greatest pictures ever made. The problem with the Matrix in particular is that the Matrix 2 and 3 exist, and those are pieces of shit. Alex Zhivago says The Godfather was classified as a Western. No, that's bullshit. That's just totally bullshit. Whoever said that was a fucking idiot and doesn't understand genres. No, he's a fucking idiot. Well, see, it's that Alex Zhivago says 6 classic American film genres of Western, horror, sci-fi, musical, film noir, and gangster I learned in film class. Is that made up intellectual BS or something to accept? It's a guideline, okay? I mean, genres are just guidelines. And to say that there are only 6, that's kind of stupid, okay? I mean, off the cuff, there's like cartoon movies and, classic Disney cartoon movies and fantasy movies. I think that that's just too limiting. Like right here, the Western, horror, sci-fi, musical, film noir, and gangster. You're ignoring swords and sandals, right? You're ignoring action adventure. No, genres are just a useful handle to understand a broad swath of information. I mean, you got to keep that in mind. A lot of people don't understand this. See, classifications in and of themselves are just useful tools. Let me put it to you this way. Suppose you have a nut and a bolt and you want to loosen the nut, right? You have some metal there and okay. Now you can use a monkey wrench or you can use a socket wrench. Does it matter? No, it does not, you know. Well, you know, the monkey wrench might be more convenient because you just happen to have it in your hand while you're doing it, or the socket wrench because you know it might fit more snugly on the nut as opposed to the monkey wrench that might loosen a little bit as you turn it. So, which tool is it? The monkey wrench or the socket wrench? Doesn't fucking matter, you know. Whichever is useful. See, same thing with genres or periods. Like I discussed, like I outlined a number of periods for you, right? Is there going to be a test? Am I going to like demand that you repeat what I said? No, it's just a useful guide. If you disagree, fine. I'm not going to argue with this shit because it's not supposed to be something to argue about. It's rather supposed to be a useful heuristic, i.e. a tool of knowledge to help you understand a very large and broad swath of information. See, a lot of guys, especially young guys, fall for the trap of classification. And let me write that down because that's actually a good topic that I should do a video on. The trap of classification. Well, let me write that down. Hang on. Trap of, yeah. So what happens is, see, in this effort, this desire, this mania to classify every fucking thing, you know, like like you're classifying butterflies or some shit like that. You know, you miss the point of these categories, and they're just supposed to help you understand a lot of information. Okay, and that way, most importantly, you can discard a lot of information because, quite frankly, there are thousands of movies that are forgettable. I mean, I didn't mention a whole bunch of them. Like, for instance, 48 Hours. That's a fine movie. It's fun as hell. You know, Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte have incredible chemistry. They fit like a charm. It's just, you know, and when Eddie Murphy was young and just like alive and he was just like on top of it in certain terms of his comedic timing, you know, the picture's great. Is it something to really like, you know, focus on and stuff like that? No, it's a trivial movie, a little action comedy kind of thing. You know, there's a whole genre of action comedies during the 80s. It started with 48 Hours, continued with pictures like Lethal Weapon, you know. They were always like odd couple movies, okay? And you can argue that during the 80s, there was this odd couple action adventure type movies. There was Tango and Cash, there was Harley Davidson and Marlboro Man, there was, 48 Hours, Lethal Weapon. They were all the same thing. Two very strong characters with very distinct personalities team up to fight crime. And it was like a whole subgenre, okay? Are you going to like start classifying that shit? No, it's just, you know, you just say, okay, that was the genre. A lot of pictures were made similarly, yeah? But you don't get hung up on the classification. Young guys tend to do this. They tend to get hung up on classification, and it's a huge mistake because you wind up wasting a whole bunch of fucking time trying to classify shit pointlessly. I mean, I know what I'm talking about because I used to do it. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that it was stupid of me. It was stupid because I was just classifying shit for no reason. You know? Okay. What are the most immoral, evil movies? There are no moral, immoral, or evil movies. That's a complete misnomer. I would suppose like the ultimate evil movie would be a snuff film. For those of you who don't know, a snuff film is a film where they kill somebody, either on accident or on purpose. The ultimate snuff films are films where they film an execution, yeah, like the ISIS films, right? Do I think that those are evil and immoral? No. What they're showing is evil and immoral, you know, executing some innocent guy, sure. But the movie in and of itself, it's just a piece of art, okay? The video that appears on LiveLeak, does not carry any kind of moral weight. It's only your interpretation of the events described of it that would be moral or immoral. Okay, that's ultimately the issue. Well, Bill is saying film is not over. Finance and technology change film. You are focusing on the change. Film is still powerful. I hope you're right. I truly do. And I yearn for those days of going into a packed theater on the first day of some really cool picture and being just like blown away by it. I remember very clearly going to see The Usual Suspects in a theater when it came out. And I watched that picture, and I was watching it, and if you guys know the ending, right? There's two endings. There's the false ending and there's the true ending. And if those of you who don't know it, turn off your headset if you don't want to get spoiled. But there's the first reveal. I'll just put it like that. There's the first reveal, and I watched the picture after watching it for an hour and a half or whatever. And there's the first reveal, and I'm like, this is the end? This is bullshit. I was like, man, this is, and I could feel the crowd around me thinking the same thing I was thinking, this is bullshit, man. That's the ending, right? And we're all disappointed, right? And everybody's like shrugging and like almost like starting to put on their coats, right? And the movie continues, and the movie continues, but it feels like it's pointless. Like it's just randomly prancing along with the scene. And one of the characters, the police commander says, about the mess in his office. He says, well, it's all got an order, And I'm like, this is just bullshit, right? And retrospectively, I remembered that line very well because, of course, right after that, the Chaz Palminteri character realizes what happened. He realizes what really happened. And he realizes that false ending, right? It was only his own bullshit. And that the real reveal, he discovers it, right? And you, the audience, like discover it. And you're like, holy fucking shit, right? It's amazing. And I remember the whole crowd around me, right? We were all electrified when the real ending happened, right? And the final line, and just like that, he's gone. Boom. And at the end, and we're like, holy fucking shit, that was a good fucking movie. Oh, that was a good fucking movie. Yeah, I remember feeling that. I remember the whole crowd felt that. And when the lights came out and they're rolling the credits and we all stood up and we're all looking around like, holy shit, did you see that? I remember it so clearly. That feeling of communal coming together, It was just so much fun. It was just fantastic. You felt like you'd had a common experience that had been really fucking powerful, And I remember that happened in 1995, 26 fucking years ago, man, or 25, because it happened, I think, in September of 95. It must have been around that time because I'd already graduated from college and I was already living in LA when I saw that picture. God damn, that was a good fucking picture. That was a great goddamn picture, And like I said, I saw it on the day it came out. And when that false ending happens, there was that feeling of like, this sucks, man. I mean, and nobody said a word, but the vibe of the whole theater was like, like fuck you, man. You're giving me this bullshit. That's the ending. And then, just like 2 scenes later, the real ending, which of course makes the previous ending fit, and it all works out. I mean, I don't want to spoil it because it's such a fantastic end, right? But those of you who've seen it know what I'm talking about. It was just fantastic, that feeling. But there, JP is saying rare moment of community. No, I remember watching Irreversible. I remember watching that fucking horror show of a movie. That movie was fucked up, okay? And that was the communal feeling when we all finished the movie. And in the final shot, the camera starts spinning on the image of Monica Bellucci. And we all started like feeling like nauseous, right? I mean, I had to close my eyes after a while because I felt like I was going to just throw up, which is, of course, the point of Gaspar Noé, right? And that picture, when it ended and the title started scrolling up, I think that the titles even go backwards, actually. Anyway, I watched that. We stood up at the end of it. I'd gone to see it with my girlfriend and another couple of friends, a man and a woman, and they were friends of ours, and we'd gone like a foursome kind of thing. It was going to be, movie and dinner, and I have no idea why the fuck we picked that movie to see as a date night movie, but we did, right? Holy shit, we were like, Jesus, man, that picture is fucking fucked up. Yeah, we all felt that. The whole theater felt it. Yeah. Oh yeah, she is fucking hot. Monica Bellucci is all kinds of hot. But see, Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump is very easy to understand if you realize it's an allegory about the baby boomers. It's Forrest Gump is America, and the character of Jenny is the baby boomers. If you understand it like that, then it makes complete sense. Yeah. Yeah. What about the Black Pill channel analyzing movies? I don't know the Black Pill channel, so I don't know what they're talking about, Andres. What are they talking about? Tell me. Well, the first season of True Detective, Aaron, it worked really well up until the end, because in the end, what should have happened is that the killer should have killed both cops and left them there. That should have been the end. That would have been a fucking amazing series, but they chickened out at the end. Yeah. Virtual reality will replace all forms of entertainment. I don't know. We'll find out. Yeah, I don't watch Devon no. Hey, what happened to The Amazing Atheist? No, not The Amazing Atheist. The other guy. The one with the kangaroo. Avatar. What's his face? You guys know who I'm talking about? Atheism is Unstoppable. That guy. What happened to him? He's still around, or is he dead? Okay. Oh, Back to the Future. Yeah, that was a great picture. But again, see, there are so many pictures that are great. I mean, I can go on for hours. Okay. And, and the pictures I've mentioned here that I've name checked here, these pictures, you add up all the name checks I've made outside of the list, and it doubles the list. Okay. I mean, I could make this list 10 times longer, easy, with great pictures. And the point of this art form is that you just have to dive in and just watch them. And there are great pictures, like, for instance, like Clint Eastwood. He's made like a whole shit ton of great pictures. Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, one of the great robbery heist pictures of all time. That's a fantastic fucking picture. And Unforgiven, The Outlaw Josie Wales, Gran Torino, and the other one, the $1 Million Baby. They're all fantastic pictures. He's an incredible filmmaker. He knows exactly what the fuck he's doing, And so there are so many pictures, that it's almost impossible to have like a manageable list. This is a manageable list of pictures that you ought to see, okay? But if you really just dive down the rabbit hole, man, you're going to be there forever, I mean, I remember there was a period of time in college that a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, a woman named Susan Foster, I've lost touch with her, unfortunately, but that's another story, because she was like a friend, like a girl who was my friend. And I didn't realize until years later that she had a thing for me. And because she had a thing for me and finally realized that I was never going to have a thing for her, she just cut off all communication, which is really sad, but that's the way it is. Anyway, we would sit and we'd go to the video store, rent 5 fucking movies, and watch them all in a row in the big screen of the common room in our dorm. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, I know Critical Drinker. He's great. Critical Drinker is fantastic. Yeah. Criterion Collection is great. I don't have a problem with them. I actually have a copy of Armageddon, the Criterion Collection Armageddon, which I understand now is like a collector's thing. People pay all kinds of money for that. Yeah. Best films to get one laid. I don't know. I mean, not Last Tango in Paris. Don't, no. You lost your virginity with Top Gun. Okay. Good on you. So anyway, guys, we've gone on 2.5 hours, so I'm going to end this webinar. Sorry I haven't taken any questions, but to tell you the truth, I'm a little bit pooped out because it's long. Well, anime, that's a whole other genre. And I don't really know much about anime. I'm not really into anime. Okay. It just doesn't appeal to me. I mean, no offense. I mean, I understand that some of it is very good and I appreciate it. I mean, I respect it, but it's just not a genre that I'm really into. Anyway, the point is we've gone on 2.5 hours. So I think that I've been talking quite enough. The point about movies is, see, just like books, see, the more movies you watch, the quicker you'll start to realize what are the great pictures. The quicker you'll realize what is really valuable. Now, this is just, you know, a casual list that can help you get started if you don't know anything. And the thing is, see, you have to make the effort to see the movies the way that they are intended to be seen, which is put them on your computer or your theater and turn off the lights and don't pause it and don't fast forward it. Okay? No matter what. Take a leak before you start watching the movies, eat something before, but focus on it, because that's how these movies were intended to be seen, with your complete attention. And when you do, you'll find that you see a lot in these pictures that if you fast forward it, you're not going to experience. A lot of times with really good filmmakers, they'll take their sweet time about something, and there's a reason for it. Barry Lyndon is a classic example. That movie, you will hate it the first time you watch it. And that's why I put it on the list. You're going to hate it, and you're going to find it really fucking boring. But the thing is, the weirdness of that movie is that the more you watch it, the more you understand why each of these shots lingers. What's the point of it? Why is it so fucking slow? And at the end of it, you watch it enough times. You watch it 6, 10 times, 12 times. And you become fucking hypnotized by it because you get what the guy is going for, and he achieves it. You know, it works. It's really remarkable. So yeah. So anyway, thanks very much for listening. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next week, but I think, like I said before, I'm going to put up a AMA, and I'll just do like a whole AMA series for next week, because I think that would be like more fun and more flexible, and it would give me the chance to talk with you guys. Because if you put questions in the AMA, I want you to be sure to show up to the webinar so that you yourself can posit your questions, and so I can speak to you directly. Okay? Okay, guys. Thanks so much, and I will catch you next time.